He's Jim Browdy. I am Marjorie Egan. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library, as we do every Tuesday and every Friday, and we are streaming at gbhnews.com / No, what is it? What is it?
I'm not telling.
I don't have my script in front of me, so you have to.
We're
I can't
streaming
find
at youtube.com / gbhnews and facebook.com / gbhnews. And by the way, the governor will be here on September 26th, 2 weeks from today, for Ask the Governor. We're joined now by who again? Who are we joined by?
Well,
Do you have your notes?
Mayor Wu seems to me to be a very organized person. She has to be a very organized person with all she's done in her life.
Okay, fine.
I am probably the most disorganized person in America. I lose things 2 seconds after they hand it to me. So I've lost my script that tells me where we're broadcasting live. Where are we broadcasting live, Jim?
I don't remember. We're joined now by Boston Mayor Michelle Wu, here from 11 to noon for Ask the Mayor. If you have a question for Mayor Wu, you can call or text at 877-301-8970. Or if you're here at the library, our colleague Hannah, hello, what happened to Hannah?
She's right there.
Oh, there she is. Hi, Hannah.
There she is, on the homie mic.
Go find Hannah, and she may allow you to ask a question. Mayor Wu, it's good to see you.
Nice to see you.
Thanks so much for being here.
Proud here at the library.
Thank you very much.
What'd you
thank
bring?
you for our gifts.
What'd you bring?
Yeah, so my show and tell for this month is a couple different, anyway, I'll just say it. It is chicken empanadas and shecas, which are sweet pastry bread from Raimundo Bakery and Taqueria on Dot Ave. And there's kind of multiple reasons for our choice. One is that it is open streets this coming Sunday on Dorchester Avenue, 10 to 3:30. So between Ashmont and Freeport Street, the vehicular traffic will be shut down, which means music, dancing, whatever you want to do, run free with your children in the streets, small businesses out. They're pretty close to the route. And Friday is also the start of Hispanic Heritage Month, so we have a lot of activities and events planned at City Hall, whether it's the Fiesta en la Plaza every weekend, events happening on City Hall Plaza, or various celebrations of different cultures within the kind of Hispanic heritage umbrella.
So when Mary Skipper, the superintendent of the Boston Public Schools, was here the other day, celebrated our 1-year anniversary, she brought cookies and sandwiches. Did you tell her to do that?
I did not, actually.
Is that really true?
I did not. I did not say a word.
It's very kind of her and kind of you.
It's very kind. I don't think we ever got any presents from Marty Walsh and all the time he was mayor. Did we ever get any presents? I don't think so.
By the way, one last note. Jamie just pointed out, or one of our colleagues did, Fiesta en la Plaza. We have the organizers and musicians from it coming this Friday. They'll be on the show as this all starts. Good to see you, Mayor Wu.
Thank you for having me.
So, Mayor Wu, we are Boston Public Radio, but a lot of people that listen to us aren't from Boston, so usually we don't talk that much about the city council in Boston, but today is the preliminary election. Not a great day for it. I hope people get to the polls. But there are 3 councilors who've had some controversies in their tenure. Ricardo Arroyo, Kendra Lara Hernandez is the 3rd councilor. Kendra Lara, people may recall, she was riding with a child in the back seat, allegedly driving too fast, and hasn't had a license for 10 years. You took a stand in the Arroyo race, backed somebody, but you kept out of the other 2, as far as I know?
Yeah, I have my, this year, these are gigantic I voted stickers. I went early this morning, and I live in one of the districts that does have a preliminary election, which is triggered when there are more than 2 candidates for the district races, and then more than 8 candidates for at-large. So we're below that threshold. So there's not a citywide election today, which makes it a little bit confusing for folks, I think. But I live in District 5. I am excited to be supporting Enrique Pepin, who knows City Hall inside out, formerly the Director of Neighborhood Services for Boston, raising his 2 kids in Roslindale, graduate of the Boston Public Schools, and we're lucky that he is stepping up to serve in this moment.
26 years old. Yeah, he's young.
Does that mean you're supporting the other 2 incumbents who've been embroiled in some controversy, Fernandez and Lara?
No, I haven't made a formal endorsement. I also don't vote in those races, and so this was about sharing the decision that I had made, and I'm following all of those very closely as well.
Speaking of voting, as you know, the Attorney General qualified several dozen questions for the November ballot next year. Obviously, they have to go out and collect signatures. One of the people collecting signatures is Max Page, head of the Mass Teachers Association, which does not represent teachers in Boston, but represents 100,000, give or take, has the MCAS as graduation requirement no more on the ballot. But one that I assume is near and dear to your heart is the rent control ballot question that Representative Connolly filed. You've said before you support it. Do you have any intention to be actively involved in the rent control. It basically seems to mirror your question, your legislation, your home rule petition, just statewide. Do you intend to get involved in the campaign?
Yeah, there's a couple ways that the two items interact, but they are in fact separate. And so we have filed our Boston home rule petition, which is up at the State House, and whatever happens with a statewide ballot initiative, that piece for the city of Boston only could be enacted by the state, again, regardless of the outcome. The ballot initiative would basically eliminate the need for the state legislature to get involved in any rent regulation at the municipal level in the future. And so if that passed, our ordinance would stand on its own and not need that approval, but even if it didn't pass, it could still go through with state approval. Now, there's a difference between the policies that are being put out there and then the actual groundwork of running a successful ballot campaign, which can take a lot of resources around fundraising and door knocking and all of that goes into any political campaign. And so I think there's a couple levels of assessment still yet to be seen about whether this is the right moment, because there's just a window. If you go up and then it's not successful, there's kind of a window where you can't go back up for a while. And so I think we
can't
have
go back
to,
up on the ballot for a while.
On the ballot,
You could go
that's
in the
right.
legislature.
That's true.
But not,
Yes,
yeah.
absolutely. So I think there's still more conversations to be had among the larger advocacy community about whether this is the moment to mount that kind of large-scale groundswell that would be needed and what the other priorities are at the moment.
So you're not even on board yet, is what you're saying. You're
I support the
reserving
idea of it.
the
I
concept.
absolutely support the concept that cities should be able to make their own
But
decisions.
you're not on board on the
And
ballot question
yes,
yet.
I have yet to kind of officially sift through, meet with, and decide my particular involvement in that campaign.
You know, as long as Jim just mentioned, Max Page is going to be with us later, the head of the MTA, which is trying to get rid of the MCAS test. They still have the test, but they would not. You wouldn't have to pass the MCAS to graduate. They're trying to get rid of that. That's going to be in the ballot as well. Do you have an opinion on that? Whether we should get rid of the MCAS as a graduation requirement?
So I've seen the impact of high stakes testing on schools, and we're in a little bit, you know, there's a trade-off on multiple fronts here. One, I do think it's really important to have ways to give solid information through assessments about how individual students are doing, where they might need more support, and the ability to use different tools through the classroom can give teachers that much needed information. And there's also valuable information that comes from the larger trends where if you see among your whole class that in fact this is an area where many students need extra support, that can translate into adjustments that are needed in curriculum or an approach or something else. It should be seen, however, as a way to, again, give that feedback rather than create a spiral, often a downward spiral for schools or for educators who, when there are specific punitive actions attached to it, rather than being seen as a way to assess and then follow through with the necessary supports.
So to be clear...
What does that mean? Does that mean you think it should still be a graduation requirement or not?
I think it's important to have graduation requirements. I am not fully sort of, you know, I don't know enough about the particulars of MCAS versus other assessments. In Boston, we are kind of supplementing with a lot of other different options as well in terms of really getting that feedback. And so I completely agree with the push of where this is coming from, that for a long time we have created cycles of disinvestment in schools that are based on a one-time snapshot that then has many, many repercussions instead of using these assessments in the way that they were designed for, which was to provide that support. And so whether that exists as a requirement or there are other requirements that can solidly ensure that everyone is graduating with a quality education, we need to have those standards, we need to have consistency. We can get there through Mass Core, we can get there through some of the other curriculum requirements as well. But I think it's an interplay of if that's not there, what would be there instead, and how is the test used if it is administered.
But again, I'm just to be clear here, you're basically saying, yes, there should be some graduation requirement. You'd prefer it not be MCAS. Is that a fair summary of what you just said?
I think we need to look at the whole experience for children, and if we reduce the graduation requirement to just having a test score, it has led to and incentivizes and creates the pressures for a system where students are taught to the test, and that is the focus of the educational environment. And so At the same time, I don't think we should just have a vacuum and erasing the idea of understanding where students need support and having a high level of quality. And so it's a larger conversation that we need to have that consistency.
Well, I want to continue this because you seem to be going in the direction of where Margie and I want to go with Mac's page later. I want to make sure you're on that same page or not, is that you want to hear what would replace it before you commit to whether or not you'd vote to eliminate it. Is
That's
that
right.
fair?
And again, my view is always very limited and focused on the city of Boston, and I know what the impacts are and how we are doing a lot of work so that the MCAS is not the be-all, end-all in our district, and moving towards the kind of very solid supports needed to be fully into Mass Core and the other curriculum standards, along with other programming through International Baccalaureate and other options. But I don't know what the statewide ramifications of that move would be.
So one last thing before we get to the phone calls. School did reopen this week. What's the recap? How have things gone?
We're feeling really good.
Yeah.
Kindergartners started yesterday, and the 1st through 12th graders started the Thursday before last week. In terms of the usual metrics that are often reported, it was a very, very successful start to the school year. Our buses were, whereas last year, okay, so let me back up and say, these numbers, I'm just going to say what the numbers are and then give a little more context. Last year, the exact on-time performance was 50% of the buses got to school with the GPS registering exactly at the time they were supposed to be there.
On day one.
On day one. It jumped a lot by day two. This year, we were well over 60%. But within that, sometimes we look at within 15 minutes of the exact arrival time, and we were 85% within 15 minutes. And I was on a bus on the very first day, along with Superintendent Skipper, and you just see on the first day, especially it was hot. We went to school with gigantic bags of school supplies, and so a lot of students are opting off the bus or not sure where their location is, and so we were on the bus waiting, and we waited past the official time that the bus was supposed to leave that location because we could see down the street a little girl was coming. We thought maybe this was her stop, and it ended up being the case that she got on the bus and the bus drivers waited on that first day, and then by the time we did that a couple times, even our bus was running a few minutes late. So, there's a lot of factors that go into that. We want to have a holistic view, but overall there was a lot of progress on buses and bus on-time performance thanks to the routes being fully staffed and a lot of the improvements to the operational parameters where the drivers are trained and ready to go. We saw in the midst of a heat wave, more than 90% of schools had air conditioning installed in every classroom well in advance of that. 18 months of installing in 78 schools AC units in every window. And overall, our staffing levels we've never had this level of these small vacancies at the beginning of the school year, and I think we felt it in the momentum.
One last thing about the 95% is the thing you agreed to on time with the state, correct? Ultimately, you reached that goal. Are you on track as far as you see based upon the first couple of days, the first week?
Yeah, I mean, I will say that whole situation of negotiating a document when I was very new into the role, when we didn't have a superintendent, we were in the midst of a superintendent search, and so there wasn't someone who, of course we have an amazing team and they were advising, but Superintendent Skipper had not even been officially selected yet, much less helping guide the exact parameters and the negotiation there. So going back, I want to aim for 100%. That is, every minute lost of a child's education matters. We have had some disagreement with DESE that I think we're working through about how to even count the denominator of that percentage, because originally they were insisting that if a GPS malfunctioned on that day, it needed to be counted. And so I think we're getting there and we're seeing great improvement. We have more work to do.
Last question. When you were here last, I'm going to characterize what you said, and obviously correct me if I'm wrong. You basically seem to be saying that what Jeff Riley, the Commissioner of Education, says to your team privately is productive and good, and he's much more critical publicly than he is in these actual work meetings. That's a fair description of what you said?
Yeah, and he's not always, just like I'm not always in the team level meetings, he's not usually in those meetings either.
Only because I'm curious about how government works amongst leaders. When the mayor of Boston makes that kind of comment about the Commissioner of Education a month ago here, do the two teams or do the two leaders talk afterwards about what it seems to me is a pretty important conflict?
I sat in and participated in that team level meeting. The next month or so, those happen on a regular basis, so I could really just more listen and understand the dynamic and the flow of kind of how specific the conversation is. The commissioner and the superintendent are in frequent contact, and I think we're working towards a chance for all of us to sit down. But I am eager to make sure we are partnering well with the state. The set of standards that are laid out in that student improvement plan that were agreed upon between the Boston Public Schools and the state, that is a very low baseline for us. Satisfying all of those things is making sure that there are bathrooms that are functional, that there are buses that get students to school on time. Our vision and our plan for Boston Public Schools goes way beyond that document. And so we actually need them not just to work with us on ensuring we're complying, but to help support us in getting the resources and the partnership to do what we actually want to do, which is deliver the best possible education for our young people.
We're talking to Mayor Wu. Should we go to the calls?
Yes, we should go to the calls. Brian in Boston, you've been very patient. Thank you for calling.
Hey,
What's
Brian.
up?
Good morning. Michelle, I think you're a terrific mayor. I think you make one smart decision after another, but there's one that doesn't make any sense to me. I live on Hemingway Street in the East End, and your administration intends to put contraflow bike lanes down this very, very heavily trafficked street, and there's just not room for it, and people are going to get hurt. Pedestrians in particular, are at risk of being hit by these uninsured vehicles and having their lives, in my case, I'm a violinist. If I broke a shoulder, I'm out of work and I got no recourse. What doesn't make sense to me is that a half a block away, the bicyclists could go down the parkway along the Fenway, similar to the way they share space along the Esplanade. That's the sensible solution, and I don't understand why your administration is pushing this. It was tried some years ago, and the neighborhood opposition was so vehement that the plans were dropped. But now, it's being presented almost as a fait accompli, and it doesn't make sense to me. I wanted to ask you about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you for calling in and for being involved in the local planning efforts. It sounds like for some amount of time. I hear your frustration, and I hear a lot of people who are very concerned about changes to streets. Oftentimes, whether it's the flow, directional flow of traffic or the number of lanes or changing the use of the lanes, that is sometimes just so ingrained in our daily commutes and lives that those changes feel particularly stressful. And our approach has been, we want to ensure that we're communicating and engaging everyone and being clear about what the goal is, while also learning and measuring from what works and then making adjustments as needed. And in some ways, the types of, the tricky part about bike lanes is that you could have a great spot for a bike lane on one street that everyone agrees with and feels fine, but then if on the next block it gets complicated and the bike lane drops off, then there's no point to having installed the first part anyway. You really need a connected network for people to be fully safe throughout their whole rides and to even make that choice. We know, and I think everyone agrees at a high level, that getting more cars off the road, even just a few number of people who, we're not asking everyone to stop driving and hop on a bike, but even those few people who want to do it but don't feel safe right now, creating that safety and that infrastructure for them does ease traffic and does make the experience better for everyone else. And in fact, sometimes where it feels most stressful to have bikes on the road is exactly where we need that dedicated and protected space for bikes, because then that removes them from that ongoing conflict that relies on not having human error to swerve, drive exactly along the lines. Putting in that protected infrastructure is what will make it safer. And so The last thing I want to say is that much of our approach right now is based on kind of what's called tactical urbanism. You try it, you put up the flex post, you build it in a way that we can see what works and see how it's going, and then be able to make the adjustments and make final decisions after that. And so in many places, we're running outright pilot programs around bus lanes or bike lanes, and in other locations, the types of materials that we're using, we are measuring very carefully what the impact is and can be responsive to that afterwards.
Brian, thank you much for your call. We really appreciate it. 877-301-8970 is the number to either text or call the mayor. And if you're here at the library and you go see Hannah, as this woman we're about to recognize has done, you may get to speak to the mayor directly. Is your name Faith?
Yes, it is.
Hi, Faith. Can you bend the microphone down just a drop?
Yes.
Perfect. Welcome.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
Again, my name is Faith. Mayor Wu, my question relates to the growing public health and safety crisis around the Boston Public Library. I live in the neighborhood, and I often see open drug use and violence in the encampments, and that activity has displaced citizens from using the bus stop, shelters, and from really the just general use and enjoyment of the library. And while the City Council considers your new ordinance the one that you proposed, does the city plan to try to use any of its current enforcement mechanisms to protect these citizens who live in the neighborhood and also the people who are in the encampments who are being victimized and have services that they need? So for example, are they being offered shelter? Is anyone trying to help them relocate their possessions and give them proper due process? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Faith. And thank you for also framing the situation in a citywide way that is about how there are multiple needs at the root of this, which we're working to address all at once in a very complex situation all around the country. I had been going through the numbers and just wanting to understand in different parts of the country what some of the approaches were. So I've been doing a lot of research as we've been working towards our proposal that will, I believe, make a big difference and is intended to very dramatically change the dynamic at MCAS and citywide. But even just starting from the data points, every single year, each city conducts what's called a point-in-time census of unsheltered individuals who are sleeping on the street because they have nowhere else to go. And that's done on one single day in the winter across the country. And that gets reported to the HUD, the federal agencies. In 2022, Boston's count of unsheltered individuals was 119 people. In Los Angeles, for example, it was almost 25,000 people. Right? So the scale of need from the combination of housing prices being very, very high and out of reach all around the country, rising opiate crisis, mental health challenges that have gone untreated is really showing up in very significant ways where cities everywhere are trying to understand how to address those root causes while also being clear that there are public safety challenges associated with this crisis that impact everyone. And so I'll just talk about this area in particular. In fact, for many years, the Back Bay Association and the local district police captain have had a partnership drawing in our public health outreach workers as well, where they have a specific program, not just to push someone out of a particular area, but to really engage and connect them with services, housing, whatever else may be needed. We have, over the last 18 months, set up an infrastructure where our coordinated response team has all of these pieces involved: public health, public safety, public works, and thinking about street sweeping and sanitation, where they are working hand in hand with community partners to provide a citywide response. Much of it is concentrated in the MCAS area because the need is so great there. But we have filed an ordinance to allow the public safety first responders to act with more immediacy. They are saying this is the protocols in place right now, which require 48-hour notice period before any action can be taken around tents that might be shielding weapons and all that. That is not working. And so we need that ordinance in place to be able to move forward with that. There's a 60-day clock on ordinances that are filed by the administration. So that clock has been running, and I believe there's been a hearing scheduled as well. So there should be some official action on that, hopefully very soon by the City Council. And in the meantime, our goal is to try to build up the infrastructure around housing, treatment, recovery. We have now built 200 units of low threshold housing to serve those individuals who had not historically been served in the shelters due to substance use and some of the strict rules that the shelters had applied. And we've also been working with the shelters to change some of their parameters so that everyone can find that safe and warm place to go while we get folks on track for workforce development and housing search and supports. In the long run, rebuilding Long Island and having much of the downtown area is built on landfill that is right at or even below where the water is going to come back to. And so it's built into every new project, but we're also shifting more and more of our emergency management planning and resources into these natural disaster planning efforts, right? Say that we had 9 inches of rain come down in a short period in Boston, or say this weekend when Hurricane Lee comes closer and we see the storm surge. Our fire department has vehicles now that are considered, they call them their climate change vehicles, right, with the gigantic tires and being able to go through to deliver supplies or extract or rescue residents who might be isolated because of high water levels. And that is where we are headed, unfortunately, to not only try to reduce emissions and do what we can to be green and healthy, but also to be prepared for whatever might happen, because those are becoming more and more frequent.
Very quickly before we take our break, Brunier mentioned China. Since you're a Harvard kid, did you ever read the book, I can't think of the title, by Graham Allison from the Kennedy School? We had him on about Thucydides' trap, and he talked about how bridges in China are literally constructed sometimes over a weekend. Obviously, the pre-stuff has to be done. It's just something that he is right. China is eating our lunch.
It's a little different government over there.
I would agree. I'm not suggesting we can be them.
I've
but
been to China exactly one time, and it was visiting before the Olympics. So it must have been sometime in 2000 and maybe early 2008 or something. So there was a lot of construction happening everywhere. And I remember one day we took a train trip out to see something, and as we were leaving the station, there was a building there that there was just men standing on top of the walls, kind of using a pickaxe and knocking away the building from on top of it. And then by the time we came back, just a couple hours later, the entire building was gone.
Oh, right? My gosh.
But at the same time, what stuck out to me was there was, instead of, where we would see cones just placed in different locations or caution tape, there was a person just standing there holding the barrier up, right? And that was when it means to have labor rights and human rights and protections for life safety, it translates into many, many more steps. And as Brunier's saying, maybe we're quite intense on that front, especially in Boston and Massachusetts. But we're finding ways, for example, at the city level, I'll give a little preview of something we're going to talk about soon, but there's been what are called IDP units, inclusionary development program units, where they're affordable units required for any new residential development. It is a very extensive process to match who's going to go live in those units with the actual buildings, and they're often then sitting vacant while that process goes on, long after the rest of the building's been filled in and people have moved in. And so we need to take a look at how we continue to have all of those protections that are built into those long processes to make sure it's fair, everyone knew about it was properly advertised, but to do so in a way that can then actually satisfy the original goal, which is get people housed.
Okay, before we break, speaking of Harvard, how's the job search going?
This has been fascinating. Okay, so I think it deserves clearing up here. There is absolutely no chance I would abandon this role for any other job at any organization, any other level of government.
The Herald wrote a story. For those who don't know, the Herald wrote a story suggesting you might have had some discussions with
that
Harvard
I was
about
stuck
a job.
and it had me in the story saying absolutely no. and then again at the end, but in the middle it was like, and here's when the special election would be, and here, this and that. So, I got my start working for Mayor Menino, and I have always believed, and having learned early on, that Boston deserves a mayor who's not eyeing the next big thing. This is the big thing. This is the most important work we could be doing, really anywhere across the country, to marshal the resources that we have with this amazing team that we have, the community members. And so we have a lot of projects that we're working on that are now, Long Island Bridge, 2027, White Stadium, 2026, rebuilding and reshaping some of the supports for our schools and school buildings years into the future. So I love my job. I think it's the best job in the world. I hope to be able to stay and have impact. And I think we're already making a difference.
How many days left do you have in your first term?
Oh, it is...
She knows, by the way, for those
841.
841.
Down to 100,000.
We're talking to Mayor Michelle Wu.
Yeah, we're going to keep talking to her till the top of the hour. You're listening to Boston Public Radio live from the Boston Public Library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News and facebook.com/GBH News. If you want to reach the mayor, the number is 877-301-8970.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marjorie Regan. We're live at the Boston Public Library. Where are we streaming, Marjorie? I forget. Where's the streaming?
We are streaming, Jim. I have my script right in front of me. Streaming at youtube.com/GBH News and facebook.com/GBH News.
And we're about 2/3 the way through the monthly Ask the Mayor with Boston Mayor Michelle Wu. If you want to call her or text her, 877-301-8970, or just come on down here to the library. Where do you want to go, Marjorie?
We have another question from the Boston Public Library, homie Mike. Do you want to take that question?
Hey there. Quentin. Hello, Quentin.
Hi, Quentin.
Hi. I was going to say my name is Quentin, but I live on Mission Hill, a little area of Mission Hill where a developer proposes to make very nearby a huge building that transgresses all height limits. It's out of character with the neighborhood. The developer previously nicely built houses, restored houses on Mission Hill, but now suddenly he's gone malignant, and I would. This is one of the 5 new huge projects around our tiny little neighborhood, Worthington Boylston Street that intersect with Tremont Street.
Quentin, what's your question for the mayor about these developments?
Can she, like Mayor Walsh and Mayor Nino, please protect us against this huge overdevelopment that's going to trash the livability of our little neighborhood?
Quentin, thanks. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Quentin. And if you, maybe my team members can come find you just to get your contact information and make sure that your thoughts are built into any of the ongoing community processes around these. What comes to my mind, first of all, is that a lot of these projects take years and years and years, and we're in a bit of a transition phase around how we think about planning and development and what the rules are for growth in Boston. We're also in a transition moment when it comes to the housing market, and as many families as are being connected with great opportunity in the schools, we are seeing far too many pushed out because of not being able to afford to stay here anymore. And so I feel a lot of pressure and urgency also in terms of generating more housing, more affordable housing, and making sure that people can live here for most of all. We want to make sure that any growth that happens in the city supports and reinforces the character of the neighborhoods, though. That is a very, very important distinction between Boston and other cities, I believe, as you really feel, as you step neighborhood to neighborhood, the history and the cultures and heritages that are represented there. And so there's an ongoing study right now, community process around community design as well, neighborhood design, with the chance to weigh in and identify what makes each neighborhood special so that it can guide even down to the materials and the shapes that are used in development, that will all be baked into the process and the rules moving forward. But overall, I would say we are more and more moving towards a system where we plan first and really think about what community needs before any projects are weighed. But we're in this moment of transition where much that has come before, we're still trying to address and make sure we respond appropriately as we build in the right systems to transition to the future.
Quentin, thank you. You know, this is broken record time. John Danilecki, Captain John Danilecki, the Boston Cops, 2 years ago.
I don't have an update on him today. I did ask. But
2 years ago, Internal Affairs said he violated use of force guidelines and lied. 21st of 21 Internal Affairs investigations. He's still supervising people in the street. Do you speak to Commissioner Cox about not just whether there's a resolution but about the need for it's not speedy anymore, but a resolution in timely fashion?
Yes, there are a lot of processes that we're working to speed up, and this one is still inside that process with no update as of today. But overall, I think the commissioner and I and the entire team want to make sure that there's predictability and efficiency and that this is not dragging on.
Has he assured you that there'll be some time frame within which there'll be a decision in Danilecki's case?
I haven't gotten a specific time frame.
One other thing about the cops, the other day you concluded negotiations surprising a lot of people with the firefighters. I believe when you entered office, every single contract was open.
48.
I believe with how many days to go? 841 days to go in your first term? With whatever, every contract is concluded, I believe, except with the police. There was a fabulous article, we're actually going to talk to Carol Rose from the Civil Liberties Union about this in a few minutes, about the mess in Springfield, the corruption with some of the cops in Springfield, and they basically say reform around things like arbitration, around firings, etc. Without that, we can't fix the corruption problem. How are you progressing in your discussions, negotiations with the Boston Cops?
We are firmly within the arbitration process now. I believe one of the first official steps of that process is happening very soon in terms of the kind of first mediation session where all of the issues are laid out. We are approaching, I've said multiple times, I'm not going to sign a contract that doesn't include significant reform, including on some of the issues that you've been raising over a while, but even here today. And as part of arbitration, the city and the union each choose one arbitrator and then agree on another. And so it's a little bit of tug of war back and forth, and historically it's been mostly a tug of war on salary levels, and that's it. We are really approaching this process using the full legal power of it to bring up the non-salary, it's related to salary and compensation, but to bring up the other operational reforms that we believe are necessary so that all officers will have the time with their family, the ability to support their health and well-being. They're not being dragged into forced overtime because there are shortages, because other people are on medical leave for years and years. And so there's a lot that ultimately comes back to supporting basic city services, having streets that are safe, neighborhoods that are cared for, and officers who are healthy and supported in doing their jobs.
Pardon my ignorance, but just if you can quickly, because I don't know the answer. If an arbitrator issues an award, what power do you have? You say you won't sign something. Do you have the power to veto an award?
I believe that so the step to making it final is to present it to the city council.
Right.
And so in that process, we could just not present it theoretically. I will double check on that, but I think we would work within the options that there are if it came back in a way that we weren't satisfied with.
But if one option was to not even present it to the city council and you weren't happy with the arbitration award, you'd do that?
If it came back as just everything as is, but for a certain dollar amount, that's right.
Okay, let's go to Michael in Michael in Watertown. Hi.
Hi. Thanks very much for having me. If, as I think is likely, a fare-free tea in Boston should prove to be impossible, what about doing what Los Angeles is doing now, fare capping, which is a daily, weekly, and I believe monthly maximum on the amount that you pay on tea? Another possibility, at least unlimited bus transfers.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. There's in fact a whole spectrum of between full fares and absolutely no fares on any part of the system. There are lots of steps in between, and some of the ones that you mentioned have been part of what we've been advocating for a long time. In fact, this last year's state budget, or this most recently passed state budget, passed in August by the governor and the state legislature, includes $5 million to really build and put together a program around low-income fares. So that's another option that we believe will be very meaningful in the short term, is for those who qualify for benefits to have discounted fares, whether it's half the price of fares or subsidized in to some other amount. But I agree that having some of the difference between buying a monthly pass or 7-day pass even versus paying day by day is on whether you have the free funds available to make that payment up front, and whether you think you're actually going to use it as many days as to justify it. Some other systems have that, what you described, where you know that you'll hit that monthly, basically you'll get the reduced monthly cost if you use it enough to justify that, but if not, you'll just be charged at the daily rate. I think that's a really important innovation as well, and we're excited that Boston now has a seat on the MBTA board to really be directly involved in fare policy.
Do you have any idea why Secretary Fiandaca, Secretary of Transportation, stepped down?
I don't know.
Does that not concern you that you and the public have no idea why she is gone so abruptly?
I mean, there are many, many things that I don't know about state government, and so it seems like there's staffing in place in order to make all the major decisions, and I know that the acting secretary, Monica Tibbetts-Nutt, is just as experienced and informed and visionary as anyone that we could find, and so there was a great team there already, and I'm very excited by Monica's leadership.
You know, we have a couple of texts about housing. We always do, the cost of housing. And a couple of texters are mentioning that universities take up a lot of housing because they don't have enough buildings, enough rooms and dorms for their kids. So is that an issue that you can address, or are the colleges doing what they should be?
We can address it tangentially. So every 10 years, each university or large institution in the city has to come up with an institutional master plan to describe their next decade of potential growth or land use that the city has to approve and sign off on. And so this year, in fact, is when many of those what are called IMPs, institutional master plans, are coming up for renegotiation, and we have a chance to make some shared commitments with our university partners on what that means. We are incorporating housing in just about every one of those conversations. And sometimes what we have seen in the past, or what community members are worried about happening because of past experience, is a university saying, okay, we are going to build campus housing, we're going to build on-campus housing so that we are not having students spill over into rental housing in the neighborhoods. But then after getting that approved, then just raising their enrollment numbers so that they fill up that housing, and then some more anyway. And so we're having very specific conversations about not just on-campus housing and really incorporating housing in that agreement, but what it would mean for impact on the neighborhoods with those enrollment numbers as well.
We only have 30 seconds left. You want to do a quick review on busing battleground that everybody is talking about?
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Superintendent Skipper and I and several of the city councilors were there with the steering committee last night. We had a bit of an advanced screening. And I've read just about every book I could find on Boston in that era and busing and what led up to it and the impacts. But to see it and to feel it, to hear the voices, to have it all put together, it was, I think most of the room was in tears as the movie ended. Just the multiple years that children were pushed to the side as a political battle played out that no one really wanted a part of. And it's an important reminder that we have a lot of work to do today, and we have a lot of resources, but we need everyone to feel that stake in not just their own communities and themselves and their families, but in our shared future.
Mayor Wu, it's great to see you as always. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you
Mayor
very
Michelle
much
Wu.
for joining. By the way, you can see that on our station, WGBH. It's PBS. You can get it on the website. You're listening to Ask the Mayor. Thank you very much again to Mayor Wu. We'll see you again next month. After the new news, we're going to talk with Carol Rose, Executive Director of the Massachusetts ACLU, about a lot of issues they're involved with over there. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH live from the Boston Public Library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News and facebook.com/GBH News. He is Jim Brady. I am Marjorie Egan. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com and and facebook.com/GBH News. Got it right that time. Hello, Jim.
Hello there. You're supposed to say the governor will join us in 2 weeks on September 26th. You want to say that?
Well, I wanted to give you a chance to say
that's
something,
very
Jim,
nice.
since you don't have enough time to say things.
Speaking of saying something, Marjorie and I forgot to order lunch today.
Yep.
So we asked our lead producer, Jamie Bologna, if he wouldn't mind to get us lunch, which he was kind enough to say yes to, which I thought was very generous. He walks over, gives us lunch. You know what he just said to me? My last boss didn't make me do this. I mean, hello?
Yeah, well...
By the way, that may have been a competing radio station. I'm not sure where he worked before.
It's just because it's hard to get over there in the short amount of time that we have.
In any case, we're joined now by Carol Rose. Carol Rose is the Executive Director of the Civil Liberties Union of Massachusetts. She joins us monthly. Hello, Carol Rose.
Hello, it's great to be here.
Great to see you.
Yeah, great to talk to you, Carol Rose. So we just spoke with Mayor Wu. You saw her. She was just here a couple of minutes ago. Yep. And we talked about police officers who have been accused of misconduct. John Danilecki, Jim talks about a lot because he has a very long record in the city of accusations of police violence and other things, and he's still on the force.
Yep.
Still policing. I mean, it is incredible. Unlike that cop in Springfield you're going to mention, at least is not policing, even though he's getting paid.
Yeah.
Danilecki is supervising cops at the same time that Internal Affairs has concluded that he used excessive force and lied. And people in his community are supposed to feel comfortable?
Well, also, he has been one of the biggest moneymakers in Boston several times, or one of the largest moneymakers in Boston several times. There's a police officer, I think it's Big Duh up in Springfield, who has been accused of terrible things, beating teenage suspects, saying to one of them, welcome to the white man's world, a kid of color, and terrorizing people and stuff. And he's still there. So I'm wondering what the ACLU's involvement is in this. And I'm also wondering, back when Rachel Rollins was the Suffolk County DA,
right,
she released this list of police officers with questionable credibility, as she put it, and ones that have been accused of misconduct, corruption, and other behavior, and said that they shouldn't be trusted as witnesses in their cases because of their history,
right,
of their bad history. So where's the ACLU in all this?
Well, we're all over it in a lot of ways, Marjorie. And one of the things to keep in mind is that you want to make sure that you have good police officers, and good police officers don't like bad ones. And so let's just be really clear. When you have these bad police officers, the few bad apples, as they say, or the many bad apples, it's really hard to get rid of them. And I think all of the things we're learning from here in Boston, from Springfield, the arbitration clauses that are often baked into the police contracts, to the union contracts, we need to find a way to address that and go back to the legislature, I think, and ask them to help us get some of these reforms through. We have the Police Officer Standards and Training, the Post Commission that was created by legislation a couple of years ago. So far, we're still in a wait and see to see if they're actually going to be able to prevent people who are accused or even convicted of violating people's rights from being able to continue to serve. So there are some mechanisms in place, but I think we're learning we need to strengthen them. And one of the things that the ACLU is doing right now, well, actually we started it a couple years ago, was to file a lawsuit out in Springfield to say that given that the Department of Justice went in and found that for a period of 6 years, this narcotics division, including this police officer, Big B, violated people's rights in just horrible ways. They, according to the Department of Justice, they inflicted physical, mental, and racial abuse on teenagers in Palmer. They assaulted a black man, a couple of them, outside the Springfield bar. They punched a 17-year-old as he rode past on his motorbike. They broke somebody's nose with multiple punches. This kind of behavior is really unacceptable. And the fact that then people were actually prosecuted by the Hampden County DA, despite the fact that maybe evidence was planted or coerced or false confessions were coerced, is really objectionable. So what the ACLU, together with the public defenders, the Committee for Public Counsel Service, and the Hampden County Lawyers for Justice and a bunch of other people, we've asked the courts to require that the Hampden County District Attorney or someone else in the Commonwealth actually do an investigation out in Springfield and to tell us what actually happened? How many people were convicted based on that kind of fraudulently obtained evidence? And what should we do about it as a Commonwealth? Because if we don't clean up the messes that are kept, that bad police officers make, then we own that. We need to hold them accountable, and we need to make sure that they're not able to testify.
Do we even know their names in all the people who?
In some instances, yes, but in some, no, because we haven't done a full investigation. And that's what we're asking for in this lawsuit, which, by the way, is going to be argued tomorrow morning.
So if we don't know their names, even if it led, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's the only case during the Trump years where the Department of Justice did what they did in Springfield, which shows how egregious the situation was. So I know this is what you're saying, but just for clarity purposes, those same corrupt cops who led to the involvement of the Department of Justice could be testifying and sending people to jail.
That's exactly right,
with corrupt cook testimony right now.
And often what happens, if you actually know their names, and the defenders can say, great, you want to put them on the witness stand? We're going to cross-examine them and impeach their credibility.
Which is exactly what Rollins was allowing to be done by defense attorneys.
Which is a way to hold them accountable. So this understanding the relationship between the police and the district attorneys is really important. And it takes all of us stepping forward, including the ACLU and the defenders and the DAs and everybody, to agree to clean this up. And we're hoping that the Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court will require that kind of an investigation so we can begin to address it.
And this is analogous, I assume, to what the ultimate outcome was with the drug lab cases, right?
Right. That's exactly right, Jim. And here's the thing. So
explain that to people, what happened there, for those who don't recall.
Right. So for those who don't recall, remember Annie Ducan?
Yes.
And
I can't think of her name.
I can't remember. Sonia Farah.
Sonia Farah, right.
At the two different drug labs, they were just making stuff up. For different reasons, they were just making stuff up. Over a period of 8 years, that tens of thousands of people were wrongfully convicted. So the ACLU, again with the public defenders, went to the court, to the Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court, and said, we need redress. All these people were wrongfully convicted because people were just making up evidence against them. And ultimately, the court ruled with us. It took about 4 years, and something like 95,000 charges were dismissed. It's the largest number of wrongful convictions ever vacated in the history of the country. And so now we have a similar kind of situation happening where we now have a different kind of wrongful behavior, this time by police officers instead of lab chemists, but the same outcome, which is that people may have been wrongfully convicted, and at a minimum we need to have an investigation to find out if that's what happened and how extensive it might be.
I know this is not the topic of the day, but every time we talk about the drug cases, I think of this. Unless I'm wrong, I think Annie Ducan got 3 years. Her sentence was 3 years. I know this is a question that shouldn't be directed to you, so why am I doing it? I have no idea.
Because you can.
When you're responsible, based upon your lies, for not only sending thousands of people to jail who otherwise might not go there, but ruining the lives of thousands of people in terms of the ability to get an apartment because of their record, get a job, support their family, etc. How is 3 years a just sentence? I don't even know. I mean, I don't understand it at all.
Well, there's the individual accountability that we need to have, but there's also the systemic accountability. All of the people who were around Annie Ducan in the drug labs, all of the people now around the police department in Springfield who are declining to investigate, not stopping it.
Does that include the DA?
Absolutely.
That you're suing?
Absolutely.
What's his, is it a man?
Yeah, because they
What's his defense? Why would he not want to disclose everything you're asking to be disclosed?
He's saying, my understanding of what their assertion is that the police haven't admitted to any wrongdoing, and therefore they don't need to do an investigation. I believe it's something along those lines.
That's their explanation?
But I'm sure it's much more complicated. You should have them on your show. But that's my understanding. And so and they're saying, in fact, I will quote one of the things that somebody from the Hampden County DA's office said. The first assistant said that investigating Springfield Police Department misconduct would keep us from doing our, quote, actual job of prosecuting people.
That is unbelievable. Wow. So we'd rather keep prosecuting people with corrupt cops than identify and outing corrupt cops. Correct. I mean, that's essentially what he's saying.
And that just simply cannot be the legal standard.
But this is,
and it certainly isn't the ethical standard.
But this is something that has been complained about a lot, this too close relationship between the district attorney's offices the police officers. And district attorneys are loath to go after police departments because of their close relationship.
I think they perceive themselves to see their job should be doing justice, not just prosecuting people.
Yeah.
Okay, can we talk about another initiative you're doing around academic freedom, book ban? I mean, every time we had David Leonard, who I saw a minute ago, the president of the library was here, I think to say hello to Mayor Wu, I'm not sure, who talked about he's learned at the association meetings that there have been book ban attempts even here in Massachusetts, not in Alabama, right here. There have been attempts to limit academic freedom. What is this hub thing? What are you trying to do?
Okay, so first of all, just to give a little context, you're absolutely right. This sort of classroom censorship, attempts at book bans, this is growing like wildfire across the country, and even here in Massachusetts. I mean, just to give you some statistics, 36 different states introduced 137 such bills in 2022. That's huge. That's a big increase. And even here in Massachusetts, we've seen at least 45 attempts to restrict access to books, with 57 different titles challenged. It's the fourth highest number of any state. So we in Massachusetts, it is. And we at the ACLU, we welcome these calls. We're trying to work with people. But here's what really matters, is that we have an information hub that we've opened up so that people who are in a school district who are hearing this, if you hear about book bans or efforts to censor things, go ahead to the aclum.org website and look at our book ban resources. It has information about students' constitutional rights, about a toolkit to help students and families take their own action, and ways for people to get involved. We're working with school departments and helping them to respond to these efforts to do censorship. And mostly, I think it's really important to understand that who's in the school board really matters. So we talk about exercising our democratic muscles and getting involved. So if you're interested out there and you are thinking about running for your school board or your town council or your city council or any of those things, really start there. That's where democracy is really protected, is at these very local levels. And so responding to these, and just remember in history, the people who want to burn the books are never on the right side of history. Okay, we know that. And I think we need to be able to make sure that our children have a right to know and a right to learn in the public school system.
And this is all available, I assume, on your website.
That's correct.
Is that CLUM.org?
No, it's ACLUM, Jim. ACLUM.org.
Okay,
Yeah, you know, a story from the Attleboro Sun Chronicle points out that in the school committee there are candidates who seem to be okay with this kind of restriction of books for school committee.
Right. So it's important that people who care about free speech also get involved and also run for office and also raise their voice and make sure that you vote down ballot, that you know who's running and what they stand for. Because these efforts, it's primarily efforts to ban books about black people and black history or to ban books about LGBTQ people. And that's terrible for those students who are in those school districts. To not be able to see themselves reflected in the materials that they're learning would be simply wrong.
Does the ACLU get involved in the ballot questions?
Well, we do, yeah.
Because there are two big ones that we've talked a lot about. The one is the rent control ballot, but it's really about allowing cities and towns to make their own decisions about whether they want to have rent control. Remember, Boston, Cambridge, and Brookline had rent control back in '94, and people out in Sturbridge and Worcester voted to get rid of it, even though Boston, Cambridge, and Brookline wanted to keep it. That's one. And the other one is the MCAS. Used as a graduation requirement. I'm going to talk to Max Page from the MTA in just a few minutes. Have you guys taken a position on that?
So our position is, in general, we support the right to the ballot. That's the most important thing, again, because the ACLU is about, you know, people having access to government and pro-democracy. So that's the most important thing. We haven't taken specific positions on either the rent control or the MCAS ballot initiatives, because, again, we're there to make sure people are able to vote on it. And there's people who have, you know, I think legitimate agreement and disagreement on those. The ones that we were really concerned about, though, are a couple that are coming out that were just certified or found to be constitutionally sound by the Attorney General, right? There were 34 different petitions. So the ones that we're really paying attention to are some voter ID laws. There were 8 different versions of a ballot for voter ID. And I think that's really scary, because one of the things to remember is we don't have a problem of voter fraud, not in the Commonwealth and frankly not across the country. We do have a problem of voter intimidation. And we don't want to put any more barriers to the right to vote than already exist, just by getting up and getting to the ballot and things like that. So sort of going to a society where you know, I always think of Eastern Germany or you know, it was like, your papers, please, you know. We don't want to have that kind of society. We don't have a voter fraud problem in the country. What we have is a voter intimidation problem. And those kinds of ballot initiatives, I think, are well-intended, but actually can be quite counterproductive to making sure that people exercise their most fundamental right. That's the right to vote.
I'm not sure they're well-intended, but regardless, there's one ballot question that neither of you mentioned, which seems to be right up your alley around transparency. Diana DiZoglio, the auditor, was on the radio with us, I don't know, about a month ago, saying that if the legislature didn't allow her, and they have not, to audit them, which she says there's great precedent for, like more than 100 audits of different levels in the past, that she is going to go collect signatures in her individual capacity, not as auditor, to change the law so that she does have the power. That was also certified by the Attorney General.
I saw
Isn't
that.
that something you'd support? I mean, that's a transparency thing, it seems to me. Isn't that not
Right.
something the ACLU would get involved in potentially?
Well, you know, it's something that we'll bring up. Again, these just all got certified.
They
And the
did.
one time I have to just tell you guys, the one time I always have to go to my full board of directors for a vote is on ballot initiatives. So I can't really say what our position is going to be. That noted, I think I really support the right of anybody to be able to go to the ballot and have the voters have a right to choose, because that's what you do in a democracy. So in terms of her right to get in on the ballot, no question that we support that.
Yeah, I'm talking about the merits. So when you talk to your board, let us know.
I will.
Can I ask your legal opinion on, I know you can't take sides on this thing either, but it's a huge talking point around America right now. Two of the arguably greatest constitutional lawyers, a liberal and a very conservative former judge, the liberal being Larry Tribe, obviously emeritus at Harvard Law School, and Judge Ludig, if that's how you pronounce his
Ludig.
name, the darling of the right in America until recently, have both concluded that 14th Amendment, Section 3, which most of us never heard about until recently, reads in part, no person shall be a senator, representative, or elector of president and vice president, or hold any office under the United States if they have engaged in insurrection or rebellion against the same, etc. The position of Professor Tribe and Judge Ludig is, I believe, and I'll use words and you'll tell me if I'm using the wrong words, but they believe you don't need a conviction by a jury. You don't need a decision by Congress in an impeachment proceeding, a conviction, which obviously there was not, even though it was a majority to convict in the second impeachment, that it is a, quote, self-enforcing provision is the term I think they use. Again, not asking you what your position is on whether or not it should be used either politically or strategically. Are they right in your estimation?
I think they are right, Jim, actually. The 14th Amendment, Section 3, basically says that if you've aided and abetted in an insurrection, that you're disqualified. So it's not a crime. It's a disqualification that they're talking about. And so what they're, and it's so interesting because this really started with some Federalist Society, sort of on the right of the political spectrum, people who wrote an article that got it started, and then people started taking it seriously.
That's a very conservative legal organization
Exactly.
that has basically bred the justices on the Supreme Court
Kavanaugh.
that Trump picked,
Amy
for those who don't know.
Doyle.
Yeah.
Right, and
Yeah.
so this is really coming to a head. There's a case that's been filed in the state court out in Colorado by 6 Republican taxpayers. So it's kind of an interesting lineup. And what they're saying is under a Colorado statute, the Secretary of State can be required to hold a hearing, a full, like an investigation almost, but a full hearing, not just to make a decision, but to actually look into it and to say, does it meet the standards of insurrection? Does it meet, and that would prevent the former President Trump from actually being on the ballot if it were found to be so. And that no doubt is going to be appealed all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court. So I think we need to stay tuned for that coming. But in the meantime, what Professor Tribe and Judge Ludig are saying is they're basically, they made this argument in the Atlantic Monthly magazine so people can go and read it. And they're making the argument that that would be one way to get there, but you could also, you don't need to have that state statute. You also could get there just under the reading of the Constitution itself. So under Section 1 of the 14th Amendment, for example, that's civil rights and civil liberties, you can file a lawsuit under, say, the Title IX or something like that, a statute, a law. But you also can just go to the court and say, my constitutional rights were violated under the Constitution itself. And that's what they mean by self-enforcing. And I think the same thing could be true of Section 3. It's just, what's interesting about it is because we've never had a situation of an attempt at an insurrection or aiding and abetting of other people engaged in insurrection before in history. So this is really cutting edge law. And it's interesting because it's going to force the people who don't think that there should be this investigation, namely Donald Trump and his supporters, to go against the originalists in the Constitution. So it's a very interesting jurisprudential legal moment for the country, and again, one of historic import.
By the way, a lot of anti-Trumpers don't support this either, not for legal reasons, but political reasons, think it has potential to backfire in a big-time way. One last question, which I find odd, that while I believe there's some energy on this front with the New Hampshire Secretary of State, Bill Galvin is the longest serving Secretary of State in America, and I don't know about either of you, have either of you read anything about someone in Massachusetts sending a letter to Bill Galvin saying Donald Trump should be denied a place on the Massachusetts primary ballot because of the 14th Amendment, Section 3?
So what's interesting here is that, and this is why I think the Colorado case is so important. In the Colorado state law, and they're in the state court, right? They tried to, Trump and his people tried to remove it to federal court, but they're stuck in state court. It says you can't be on the ballot. What the Constitution says is you cannot hold office.
Oh, I see.
Right? And so
see.
in a state like Massachusetts where we don't have a law that says that, it would be a little bit of a higher climb because it could be, well, he could run, he just can't serve. Which
so even if he were to win without that state law, he could run, he could win primaries, he could be the nominee, he could be elected, in quotes, but not be allowed to serve, the argument goes.
It could be total, right. And
that would go well, wouldn't it?
That would create such chaos. And, you know, as Professor Tribe said recently, he said, you know, it's not like this court is unwilling to create chaos. But one can hope that the logical conclusion that if you cannot hold the office, should you be permitted to run for the office, I think that's something the court is going to actually rule on, and we'll have to stay tuned and see what they do.
You know, even though you say, last thing on this, even though you argue that you agree with their interpretation that it is a self-enforcing provision, it would seem to me legally, I know this isn't binding, but legally, the fact that the Department of Justice did not include insurrection as one of the charges, something they could have had they chosen to, but arguably either for strategic reasons or maybe legal reasons, that sort of weighs against a court determining that it's self-enforcing, don't you think?
It might, but I think in Colorado where you have both the statutory, and that's why I think that case is the best case, and the decision to bring it there was a strong tactical move.
You know, one last thing before you go, Carol Rose. I don't know why I find this kind of ironic, but the first person I've heard talk extensively about ethics reform at the Supreme Court is Justice Kavanaugh. And we all remember Justice Kavanaugh accused of sexually assaulting a young woman when he was in high school, and so was she. In any case, we've heard a lot about Clarence Thomas and his lavish vacations, and Ginny Thomas and her, this most recent thing that she was basically starting a nonprofit years ago before the Citizens United case came down with aforementioned Leonard Leo from the Federalist Society, he's a big conservative guy that has funded all these people to go to the Supreme Court. And this was funded by this Harlan Crow guy that has been involved with taking Thomas on all these vacations, and Alito's not disclosed things he should have. But in any case, Kavanaugh says they're just talking about this, and there may be ethics changes.
Hold your breath.
Yeah, is that what I should think? Hold your breath?
Yeah, unfortunately, I just think this court seems to be sort of beyond shame. At least parts of it seem to be beyond shame. Nonetheless, I think we should applaud it, search for ethics reform, demand ethics reform, call for ethics reform, and other changes. But right now, until the court decides to fix itself, or Congress, which seems kind of gridlocked, takes steps to try to reform the court, what we are left with is trying to work in the courts where we can. So the issues in the state court, whether in Colorado we talked about, or here in Massachusetts with the Supreme Judicial Court, that's where the action is on defending civil rights and civil liberties for the moment, as well as in the state legislatures and in the school boards and the city halls and things around. So we have to use every tool in our toolkit to try to strengthen our democracy and, frankly, save our constitutional republic.
By the way, don't take this personally. I hate that expression, every tool in the toolkit, but putting that aside.
I'll never say it again.
For a second, we're going to talk about expressions we hate at the end of the show.
Expressions, yeah.
But before we get
That's on the top of the list, Carol, I hate to tell you.
Before we get to that,
I'm so honored.
I don't want to gloss over what Marjorie said. Very quickly, there's a wonderful story in Politico written by Heidi, and I can never pronounce her last name, Prisbilla or some such thing. And the interesting part of the story that's not getting nearly enough attention, they're talking about, as Marjorie said, the creation of this nonprofit with Leonard Leo, and insurrectionist Ginny Thomas, and she is an insurrectionist, to allow unlimited funds to go into this nonprofit to help candidates, which was illegal at the time they set it up, but became legal 2 months later after the Citizens United case, sort of blows away the argument that she doesn't talk to her husband about these cases. Obviously, that came up when the documents that he did not want released in an 8-1 decision, with him being the one from Trump, included her text to Mark Meadows and people like that. I mean, really. I mean,
it's beyond shameful.
It is really beyond shameful.
Yeah, it
That's
really
it.
is.
Okay.
So, by the way, don't say deep dive.
Okay. What are
Okay.
the other ones?
What's the thing you just said that I didn't
I'm
like?
not saying it again.
Toolkits. I don't
I'm
like
not
anything
saying
about
anything.
toolkits.
Every tool in the toolkit.
No deep dives and no whatever it is. In any case, listen in at about 1:30. We'll let you know what's
I'll
on
tune
the
in.
list.
Okay.
Carol Rose,
Thanks.
it's
Carol
great to
Rose,
see you.
thank you
I
very much.
defend everybody's free speech.
Oh, yes, you do.
Carol Rose,
Including
it's
your
like,
own,
that's
yes.
right. You say whatever you want, Carol.
Good to
Carol
see
Rose
you,
is
Carol.
Executive Director of the ACLU of Massachusetts. Coming up after a quick break, NBC Sports Boston's Trenny Casey. She's going to tell us about the poor New York Jets. They just paid $75 million for 2 years for Aaron Rodgers, and guess what? He's going to miss the rest of the season. We're going to hear about that and more news in the sporting world. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News and facebook.com/GBH News.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marjorie are live at the library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News and facebook.com/GBH News. We're joined by Trenny Casey, anchor reporter for NBC Sports Boston. Hey there, Trenny. How are you?
Hi, guys.
Hi, Trenny Casey. So I just mentioned this in your before you came on here about Aaron Rodgers, $75 million for 2 years at the New York Jets, and he's knocked out with a torn Achilles beginning of the first game.
4 snaps into his career with the New York Jets, and Aaron Rodgers is out for the season. Adam Schefter of ESPN reported the news about an hour ago. He is gone, ruptured Achilles. And what was most interesting about the post on X, whatever we're calling it, a post, a tweet, I don't know, was the last line of Schefter's post, which said, possibly a Hall of Fame career. Like, this could be career ending for Aaron Rodgers. Listen,
incredible.
You could come back from it, right? Like, you've got the tools, you have the doctors and the physical therapy, but the reality is he's 39 years old. He's going to be 40 years old in December. He was hemming and hawing whether or not to continue playing football in the offseason. Remember, he went to the dark room. He spent like 4 days in darkness and emerged. And, the Johnson family had called him and said, we want you to be a New York Jet. And then he decided to be a Jet. But he was not sure that he wanted to continue playing football. So I do wonder if the money he has made, if the time it would take to rehab, to get not just back into physical condition, but physical condition to play a grueling 17-game NFL season at 40 listen, I've never ruptured an Achilles. I know it's a very long, difficult process to come back from. Usually, I think it's anywhere from 6 to 12 months, 8 to 12 months, somewhere in there. I don't know. I don't know if he'll come back. I don't know if he'll have the desire. Now, part of me thinks absolutely, because he's such an egomaniac. He certainly doesn't want to go down 4 snaps into his career. But there's also a part of me that thinks I felt like maybe he was losing some passion for the game before. Do you have it a year plus later when you finally come back?
You know what we should say, by the way, we're talking as everybody knows who he is. One of the greatest quarterbacks ever. I think 4 MVPs, played his whole career with the Green Bay Packers, and at the end of his career was moving to New York to be the savior for the New York Jets. Marjorie, I'm sorry.
That's right. But as we all know, if this does not go well for him, he can return to where he was a backup at the game show. The game
Jeopardy.
show.
I thought he was great.
I
thought he was a great host.
I thought he was
Jeopardy.
terrific too. Here's
Yes.
a little clip from his run as a Jeopardy host. This was 2 years ago.
And over to our champion, who was in the lead. What did you put down? who is Brigham Young, a familiar answer. The correct response was actually Leland Stanford, who was the president of the Central Pacific Railroad, and later founded this school in the Bay Area that gets beat by Cal all the time.
He went to Cal,
Yes,
by
he went
the
to
way,
Cal.
which is why.
That was very good.
You want to just realize
He
that's
looked great too. Not that that should matter, of course.
Of course it does. Now, as we're discussing,
He's certainly not what the New York Post termed Botox Brady.
Oh, did they call him Botox
well,
Brady?
speaking of Botox for a second, I'm sure I'm about the 4 millionth person who thought of this, but I'm going to say it anyway. Instead of that pathetic quarterback who was the quarterback last year who filled in yesterday.
Zach Wilson?
Yeah, you know who's going to be the next quarterback of the New York Jets?
No.
So you're not the first person to mention this today.
no.
Why not?
So listen,
mean,
I would be
enough already.
I would be a little surprised just because he has. I mean, I don't know what kind of workouts he's been doing, but if
Who are we
you-
talking about
We're
first
talking about
of all?
Tom Brady.
Brady.
Sorry, for those of you who aren't following our innuendo, we are discussing, of course, Tom Brady.
Tom Brady.
And it was suggested just this morning. I'm watching Good Morning Football on NFL Network, and Peter Schrager, who works for Fox and for NFL Network, said, "If I'm the New York Jets, you have to call Tom Brady."
Of course you do.
He looked in good
How
shape
great.
on Sunday when he ran onto the field. You know, he was fired up. Now, would Brady, after saying in front of 70,000+ fans on Sunday, saying, "I'm a Patriot for life," turn around,
Yes.
relinquish his part ownership in the Las Vegas Raiders, and decide to go back to football and play for the Patriots? I would say the Patriots' greatest rival in the New York Jets. I don't know, but maybe he would. Maybe he says, "Listen, I'll always be a Patriot for life, but they need me. I miss playing. I'm going to go back." And then do they have to take those Lay's commercials off the air or whatever, where he's sitting with
Yeah.
Julian Edelman and
Those
not
are
playing
pretty good
football? Those are great
commercials,
commercials.
by the
To him and Edmund Smith and Dan Marino.
So for
Meanwhile,
those who don't
Giselle
know,
has moved to some equestrian estate.
Oh.
I don't know what that means. I guess it means
Equestrian estate. It's just like a
place
horse
with
farm.
a lot of horses, I guess.
Just a-
okay,
It's
so
a
for
fancy
those who
term for
don't
horse
know,
farm.
Brady was honored at halftime of the Patriots' first game. You couldn't watch it on the station, so you had to go to patriots.com.
Were you
where
able to watch it?
It crashed.
It did, okay.
Yeah, it was frozen the whole time I was
That's
there. You
what
could
I
never
heard.
see anything, so I
Yeah.
listened to it on the radio. Brady was, I thought, good. I didn't really understand what the point was when it was over. I mean, it didn't really achieve much, except that they're going to have a big event
You
for him
get
at
your
Gillette.
wish.
Yeah, but I know, but just
Hold
do
on.
it.
What I didn't understand about this must have something to do with TV rights. The local TV stations couldn't go down and film the halftime thing.
So you can, but you can't air it. Like, I don't, you know what? And honestly, there might have been a pool camera, so
Yeah.
there's not a bunch of cameras down there. So it may have been like their local partner, which would be WBZ.
Yes.
I honestly don't know how that worked.
Because that's what I was surprised.
No, they were precluded. I don't know what the reason was,
Yeah.
but I
Yeah.
read a lot about
Well,
it.
what you can't do is CBS nationally has the rights. Obviously, I don't know why you can't preempt the CBS halftime show to have shown that instead, just on the local CBSs
Yeah,
in New England.
exactly.
That I don't understand. Like that to me, they preempt stuff all the time. You know, like you just to me, you pay a little bit to CBS or you're their affiliate. You make a deal with them. You give them that time back somewhere else. I don't know why it wasn't able to be broadcast locally. I have no idea. That's above my pay grade.
Okay.
But rather than watching it on the Patriots thing, I just went back and watched it online like afterwards. I
Why
just
there are
watched the
about 40
replay.
cops on motorcycles on Boylston Street?
You know,
And they're
that's a
stopping, they are
great question.
turning,
I don't
they're
know.
stopping, they're blocking the street. Do we have any idea what's
I
going on
don't
here?
know.
They have taken right turns, they have parked
But it looks like
on
it's a
Boylston Street,
ceremonial kind of
right
thing
by the
there.
marathon finish line. Well, we'll continue to keep an eye
Yeah,
on this.
I don't
know what's
know.
going on. I'm telling you, Brady is a New York Jet by, I'd say, tomorrow afternoon. You know,
I mean, Jim, if you're right, are
Can
you
it get
kidding
any
me?
better than that?
Could it get any better?
No, it's terrible. Every time I've seen him play football for the last 5 years, which is not often actually, but I think one hit to the head, that's it. You know, he's out. I mean, it's crazy.
I mean, I think I'm more worried about that with Tua Tagovailoa than I am with Tom Brady. I mean, while
He's the guy for the
he's the
Miami
he's the
team,
quarterback
right.
from the Miami Dolphins who had 2 documented, most people think 3 pretty severe
Yeah.
concussions last year. Listen, it's a risk every time you're out there. Look at Aaron Rodgers yesterday. Yes, he was sacked, but for the most part, that was a routine. He wasn't violently hit down to the ground.
No,
it was
not
just
at
if
all.
you
It's
look,
true.
it was like the way that his leg moved, and he had been having calf and ankle injuries for a
Yep,
while. So I don't know
yep.
if the one led to another, but then his Achilles ruptures. It just blows.
By the
you
way, I
know?
just went to Brady's Twitter account. He just tweeted, "I am a New York Jet for life." That's what he said.
Stop.
I don't know what. Okay, so
God, as a person in sports media, please, dear
please,
God,
exactly.
let Tom Brady go
so
to the
Coco
Jets.
Gauff at 19 wins the U.S. Open, and I have to say, this is one of the most charming quotes after the fact. Here she is. She's on Instagram Live answering questions, and she laughs when a fan suggests she pay off her debts with her $3 million prize money. Here's Coco Gauff.
Somebody said pay off debts. I'm 19. I don't have any debt. I'm not in debt. Like, I live with my parents.
I love that.
So I'm not in debt. I didn't go to college, so I don't have any student bills to pay. Yes, I'm not in debt. I'm too young. My parents have never put me in that position to be in debt. So yeah, I have nothing to pay right now.
I love when she says, "I'm too young. I still live with my parents."
I know.
The U.S. Open champion is living with her parents. Do you see the hug
and it's
with
also
her
wild.
parents
Her
too?
career earnings on tour
I know,
$8 million,
I know.
and that doesn't include the money she makes from Barilla Pasta, which is
Right.
of course on her jersey.
Mm-hmm.
She's a New Balance athlete. I'm sure you guys knew that, right? New Balance here in Boston. She's a New Balance athlete. I just think I want her to succeed and to be the next big thing in tennis so badly. She is just such a charming young woman to watch. The other quote I love from her, and you may not have seen this, but of course, she burst onto the scene at 14. I thought it was 15. It was 14 years old.
Yeah.
She made it to the 4th round of Wimbledon, and then she kind of struggled. It took her a while to win a 500 tournament, then a WTA 1000, which is kind of like the next step up. She finally won on some of the bigger tours. She won in Cincinnati this year, beating Iga Swiatek, who is, arguably one of the best tennis players in the world right now, next to Aryna Sabalenka and Coco Gauff. And so a lot of people were saying, oh, she's going to just fizzle out again. She's not going to have the medal to win at the U.S. Open. And she said, all those people who thought they were pouring water on my fire were only pouring gas. And I was like, man, for a 19-year-old. And did you see the video too of her at 8 years old? She went to watch, it would have been 2012. She was 8 years old. She went to the U.S. Open with her father and her mother to watch tennis because she was a young tennis player. And she's dancing to Call Me Maybe in the stands. And she's got these little pigtails in, and she's dancing up like high up with the match going on behind her. And 8 years later, she is winning the U.S. Open. Did you guys watch the match?
No.
So it was an unbelievable. She fell behind in the first set. I thought, oh man, she
got
just
crushed in the first
crushed.
set.
I think 6-2 or 6-3. Sabalenka double broke her. But in the second and third sets, she double broke Sabalenka and just was unstoppable. It was an incredible match to watch. It gives me goosebumps talking about it right now. We all watched, a bunch of us girls watched it together. It was awesome.
By the way, what's happening with the police here, it's a 9/11 photo shoot at the Marathon bombing memorial. Sandra, our colleague, just found out. So we've been talking, I guess, since Spain won the Women's World Cup in soccer, what was going to happen to this Rubiales, the president of the federation. Well, it turns out not only is he finally gone, everybody's gone. I mean, the coach is gone. He's gone. And the best part of this whole story, beyond the fact that justice finally prevailed, is apparently a strike by some of these soccer players for better wages was inspired by all these women standing up against these men. I mean, how great is this?
And they said, you know what? We are not going to play. We are not going to continue to line your pockets. You are not going to benefit off of our success. We are the ones who won in the World Cup. You are not now going to make money on, it's Liga B, I believe, it's La Liga for the men's side. I think it's a Liga B, is the professional women's circuit in Spain. And they have forfeited the first 2 games and said, until
I didn't know that.
Yeah, they said, you know what? We're not playing the first 2 games. We are going to sit. You are going to pay us. And when you looked at the disparity in pay for men and women soccer players in Spain, and I might be getting the numbers wrong. I don't know if you have the paper in front of you, but I believe the women made an average of $17,000 a year, and the men made an average of like $170,000 or something like that. I mean, it was night and day. And listen, it's this. I have to think that much like, I think men's soccer in Spain is probably more popular than women's soccer, but it is certainly gaining traction, and they are going to have a greater following after winning the World Cup, and they deserve to be rewarded for that.
You know who's going to be the new president of the Soccer Federation? Tom Brady. Tom Brady. That's what I just read. He just tweeted he's going to...
Jet for life and running the women's Spanish Women's Soccer
he's going to be a
Federation.
sportscaster, isn't he? On
Allegedly.
Fox? Is that what he's going to do?
No, but they're only paying him $35 million a year.
I
Why would
know.
he waste his time on
He's
something
not
like
an
that?
electric personality, though. You know what I mean?
No, he's not.
The guys, that
Well,
really
it's hard to be electric when your face doesn't move.
Yeah.
That is unkind. So, speaking of soccer, can we stay there for a second? The guy who was the coach of the Revolution.
Probably still in town. Hi, Tom. Love you.
Was just dumped.
Love you, miss you.
He was
Bruce
just dumped,
Arena
too. What was going on
for
there?
inappropriate comments, whatever. You can speak to that.
Bruce Arena.
Yeah.
But, the really troubling thing to me is here's a guy, he's 71, but who knows? He's the winningest coach in that league. He may end up getting another job. Ime Udoka is gone. He's now coach of the Houston team. And the public, the players, no one has ever been told what is the behavior that was serious enough that both guys get fired from their jobs.
I agree. I don't like it, Jim. Listen, not that I know what I was going to say. Not that we're owed. Yes, we are owed.
I think we are too.
It's their salaries are paid in part by and I say I mean fan investment in these teams. And I just feel like the more I think about these two situations, you are protecting men who did something wrong. And I think they hide behind the protecting of the victim. So we don't want to say you don't have to reveal who the victim is. You don't have to reveal what anything was said, but we do deserve to know. I think people deserve to know what was said. Because also, what if it was, honestly, and I'm sure it was if it rises to the level of being fired, but what if it wasn't that bad? What if you heard it and go, well, hold on a second, why are you firing a guy for that? That's something that, that you could apologize for. It's maybe you've gone too far in one direction or the other, but I mostly just feel they are protecting these guys so that people don't drag their name even further through the mud, and I don't know why they deserve that.
I said this to you before.
It's a typical thing, though. You hear that all over the place.
What?
Out of respect to the victim, we're not going to explain the details. Well, you don't even know who the victim is. I mean,
Yes.
it is.
And I think there are
it's
very
also
easy ways to tell us what happened without even hinting at who may have been the person that was victimized.
Right, and we said this before, but in the case of Ime Udoka, just for a second, he's now coaching at Houston. And while they allegedly are concerned about protecting the victims, whoever it was in the Celtics, they're women who work for the Houston Rockets. How are they protected? What should they be protected against? This is total BS, a total BS by both these teams.
And with the Bruce Arena thing, we don't know, was it racial? Was it gender? I have no clue. I have honestly, and we have a couple people in our office who are pretty big Revs fans and who are sort of tied in, and nobody knows. It's just, and no one talked about it, and it took forever, and it's hanging over the team. And again, I don't understand why you are protecting these people. If you get in trouble, you get in trouble. You should be carrying.
If you've done something
serious
enough to lose your job, then it's serious enough for the public to know about.
I thought we did know more about Ime Udoka.
I don't think we do. No, there are rumors, but none of them are confirmed.
I think maybe I've told you off air some things that we've heard behind the scenes.
You got to be really careful with Marjorie off air.
Okay, I'm sure if you said it off air that lots of people do know those same things, so it might be a little bit different.
No, it's not different. Because if all it is backdoor conversation, unconfirmed, then you're not protecting the women on the team where he went. Period. It's ridiculous. And by the way, speaking of protecting these women, getting back to Ime Udoka, a ton of women's names were floated on social media as his, quote, partners, collaborators, whatever the hell it was.
Right.
None of whom were the people.
Yeah, I know. And that to me, that's where the protecting the victim side is a bunch of BS,
Exactly right.
Because when you don't say what happened, although I suppose in not naming the victim, if you say what happened, then there's still speculation, right? It's just people speculate. People want to know. I mean, I'll be honest. Even I wanted to know who the alleged person was. You were curious as to who it was all tied to. But the problem is most people aren't just curious. They get to the point of being accusatory in a public manner. And when you do that, Allison Footer immediately, not Allison Footer, Allison, she's a writer for MLB.com, who I literally just read this morning. One of the assistant coaches and people who are on the staff of the Celtics, her name was dragged through the mud. And it's sick and it's wrong. And the Celtics apologized, but that doesn't do enough. And I don't feel like they protected those women as much as they protected Ime Udoka.
Okay, we only have a minute and a half left. The big debate in Boston now is, was it a moral victory for
yes.
the New
Hey,
England
congratulations,
Patriots
Eagles fan.
to lose. Thank you very much. To lose, I'm sort of a Patriots fan. I am a Patriots fan. I'm just more of an Eagles fan because I'm from Philly. Was it a moral victory to come this close to the team that was the runner-up in the Super Bowl?
No, you don't get. I'm not big on moral victories.
Nor
Also,
am
as Tommy Curran wrote an article yesterday, like you can't measure a moral victory until it's like down the line, right? So if they go out and they lose to Miami, if they start now
That's
with
this
everything
weekend.
that so they play Miami next, and then I believe they play at the Jets, and then they play at Dallas. So that was supposed to be a really tough 4-game stretch. Now that game at the Jets looks a little bit more manageable with Zach Wilson at quarterback instead of Aaron Rodgers. But let's just say they go down there and they lose 0-4. Is it really a moral victory that you almost beat the Eagles? Like, no, you beat yourselves. You had every opportunity to win that game. And they couldn't complete passes, and they couldn't keep their feet in bounds, and they were holding calls and jumping off sides and delay of game penalties. Like, no, you had an opportunity. You didn't win. That's not a moral victory. But they did look better. All that's to say they did look better. And this whole thing that happened to Aaron Rodgers, guys, does open a door for the Patriots.
It does. Well,
Like a
unless
pretty
Tom
big
Brady
door.
is the quarterback for the New York
Yeah.
Jets. I am telling you.
I thought he was going to run the soccer league, Jim. Make up
he's-
your mind.
No, he's going to do that off season.
Yeah.
And he's going to
Okay.
be the quarter. Can you imagine how thrilling
Has he
it would be?
has he tweeted anything, Tom
I
Brady, in the
don't-
last?
I
Because
don't
I am
follow
curious. Because
Tom
sometimes
Brady.
silence is an
Thank you very
indication.
much.
I
Has he
don't
tweeted his
know.
condolences to Aaron Rodgers?
Did he?
about-
I don't know.
I don't know.
I don't know. A
I
lot
don't
of
know.
quarterbacks have tweeted their condolences.
Okay.
He
Well,
is still alive, by the
Why
way.
don't you check it out, Jim?
I feel sort of bad for the guy.
I
Not
do.
For
Brady.
Aaron Rodgers?
Yeah, I mean,
I
your
do.
Achilles, that's a big deal, right?
I do.
mean,
Listen,
it's a long recovery.
He is kind of a weirdo.
He is
and
beyond
he's an
kind of a
anti-vaxxer.
weirdo and an
he
anti-vaxxer.
hasn't and he hasn't
and
spoken
a liar about being
Yeah.
an anti-vaxxer.
and he hasn't spoken to his parents in like 12 years.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I didn't
So
know
I'm
that.
not like
He
the guy's
hasn't
like
spoken to
I
his
missed
parents
that.
in 12 years? What's that all about?
I don't. No one knows.
No one knows.
No one really
Ah,
knows.
another
There's something
secret.
going on there.
Something
a lot
going
of
on.
secrets in that closet.
Jamie says his latest tweet is about him playing basketball.
Oh,
For who? The Knicks? I mean, what does that mean? Okay, fine.
I
Go
don't
ahead.
think you can play basketball if you have an Achilles.
No,
No,
not
Tom
Aaron
Brady.
Rodgers. Tom
Brady playing basketball?
My God,
I'm sure
this
it's like
is
a
total
pickup thing.
chaos.
Okay.
Okay, we're done.
We're done.
Goodbye.
Okay, it's gotta
Nice
go.
to see you.
12:30 half hour is wild. over here.
Trenny Casey, great to see you. Thanks so much.
We've been speaking with NBC Sports Boston anchor, reporter, and BPR contributor Trenny Casey. Thank you very much, Trenny. After a quick break, Max Page, who's head of the Massachusetts Teachers Association, the largest union in the state, is going to talk about a ballot question about MCAS, about some affirmative action stuff, and a bunch of other news involving education. Listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News and facebook.com/GBH News.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan. We're live at the library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News, facebook.com/GBH News. 2 weeks from today, that's correct. On the 26th, the governor will join us in studio for Ask the Governor, in studio at the library. We're joined now by the president of the largest union in Massachusetts, the Mass Teachers Association, and in an effort to preclude Marjorie from destroying my credibility, I will do it myself. In 1991, yes, it's true, I was the 5th recipient of the President's
That's
Award
right.
from the Mass Teachers Association, long before Max Page was the president
But
of the Mass Teachers
say,
Association.
the Massachusetts Teachers Association got their money's worth with that investment in Jim Browdy, because he's going to be carrying your water forever, no matter what.
Thank you very much.
So-
Good to see you, Max Page.
Good to see
Appreciate
you.
being here.
So thank you very much for
Ay,
being
ay,
here,
ay.
Max Page. So the ballot questions are out, and one of the ballot questions that you guys are supporting over at the Massachusetts Teachers Association is to continue the MCAS testing, but no longer will the MCAS be a requirement for graduation. So what is your argument? Why should it be eliminated as a graduation requirement?
Well, this is something we've been hearing from our members for more than a decade beyond, that the high-stakes nature of MCAS has been harmful to students. Thousands of students have not been able to graduate, but also that it has led to a lot of test prep and less teaching time, and that it really, in that way, is harmful to our students in our schools. And I'll also say this, it has become a kind of a de facto way of evaluating schools, when in fact, over and over it's been proven that MCAS scores are so closely tied to family income. So if you're looking for a measure of how a school is doing, you're not actually getting that from the MCAS. But I want to say something really important.
Wait, before you even finish that,
Yeah.
but you're going to allow it to continue, just not as a graduation requirement. So how is it not going to be used to judge schools?
Well, it won't have the high stakes impact. That is, it won't be able to deny students graduation,
Understood.
diploma, and it will not be able to be used for sending students into receivership, like the 3 districts and
I
many
see.
schools in Boston.
Okay, but I interrupt you. Go ahead. What's the big thing you wanted to say?
No, I just forgot.
My
what the
apologies.
big thing.
Okay.
The graduation requirement part.
Yes, the graduation requirement part is what makes us unique, or almost unique. There's only 8 states in the entire country that have done that. We will. What I wanted to say was that the test will be there for those who think there is some value in it. And I grew up in Massachusetts. My kids went to the same schools I did, Amherst, Massachusetts. We took something called the California Test for Basic Skills. It flew in. We took it. Maybe it had some diagnostic value. I still think there's many on the right and left who think that we need to change this test to make it more effective. But
And
the
maybe
key
less
is
time consuming.
less time. I mean, this is agreed to by conservatives and for us at the MTA. Too time consuming, not enough languages. The test scores don't come back until the next year. So how is that helping a teacher right here and now? So the test will be offered. It's a federal requirement. But what is not going to be there is if we win this, is the high stakes nature of the graduation requirement.
You know, you just said thousands of kids don't graduate. You know, you took some criticism for saying I think 50,000 kids don't graduate. In fact, I think 72 or 74% of the kids that don't pass the MCAS were not going to graduate anyway because they hadn't passed a graduation. So when you say thousands, what is the actual number? It's
So
not
we don't
50.
have the exact number. That's true. We use numbers from our allies, Citizens for Public Schools, and they acknowledge that those numbers encapsulated students who may also have failed, not graduated because of their not passing classes and the like. We know it is that over the past decade, it's many thousands we're trying to get from the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, those accurate numbers.
You know,
But
Max Page, it seems to me in a campaign, and you've got a lot of money, and the opposition says they're going to spend as much as $20 or $30 million. It would seem to me the two things are going to be used against you. And by the way, I support the concept. Is one that they're going to say, you cook the books in April. That's whether you have apologized for it as you're doing now or not. Obviously, that doesn't go away. Secondly, it seems to me the most important hurdle for you is the one that Mayor Wu erected. We asked Mayor Wu in the 11 o'clock hour if she supported this ballot question. And I'm going to paraphrase what she said. She seemed to be saying, correct me, Margie, if I'm wrong, that she's not crazy about MCAS as a graduation requirement, but before she takes a position, she wants to know, this is what Marjorie always says to me through the years when I'm saying it shouldn't be a graduation requirement, tell me what's going to replace it so we're able to make a fair acknowledgement or a fair judging of whether or not that person really is ready for graduation. You haven't filled in that blank yet.
So first, there's sort of an assumption that somehow the MCAS is doing that, we're replacing it with something equal. The MCAS is failing in that regard. It does not, it's so closely tied.
But people want something, even if it is failing.
Well,
what
it's
is the something?
When we've talked to the general public and actually polled on this question, When you say, let's ask our teachers who we trust, no one's more trusted, maybe nurses a little bit more, than teachers in the state, using our high standards. We believe in the standards that we've set across the board in our different academic subjects. And you trust the teachers. It turns out that the grades that teachers provide are a better evaluation of how students have done than standardized
Says who?
tests.
Well, but
Who says
but I
that?
think-
Wait, who says that?
There, I have different reports. If we could,
Okay.
I could show that they've looked at what's about parent grade. I mean, teacher grades versus SATs for college. It turns out that the grades are at least as good as standardized tests in evaluating.
But I
them.
guess the thing is, and I too grew up in Massachusetts, and I went to a poor school system and was not well prepared for college. And my kids went to a much better school system, and they learned subjects and verbs after, I think I told this before, after MCAS came in. They didn't know what subjects and verbs were until MCAS came, and I thought that was terrible. But I don't know that everybody thinks that grades. I mean, I think the problem is that there's a sense that your kid may not be learning what they need to learn to go on in the world. And if you're just going to say, well, the kid got, B- and this, and that, it could be grade inflation. It could just be too subjective. There needs to be some kind of standard so the kids from the poor systems have some acknowledgement of where they should be.
So again, we will have, not only do we have the MCAS will be with us because it is a federal requirement
Right.
to have annual testing. So if that has some value of looking at that, we could do that. There's also local districts do their own kinds of pre and post assessments. There's a lot of testing going on and not as much learning going on.
Why hasn't it? Because I hear that complaint all the time. It takes forever. You got to bring the kids all the snacks and everything else when they're going to have the MCAS. Why is it this long, drawn-out process? It doesn't seem to me, and I'm not an educator, it should take that much time.
Remember, this is before we go to it's a government problem. This is a private company, Pearson, and we hire companies to actually develop these and then grade them. So it's not clear why it should take that long. And I think everyone's agreed that even if our ballot initiative passes and we still have the MCAS, it should be more useful as a tool. There should be a better version of this.
We're talking to Max Page, president of the Mass Teachers Association. It took me about a minute. I could never come up with the word evaluating. It's a very difficult word. Obviously, I wouldn't have passed MCAS. I just want to be clear. So your position is going to be that not only that MCAS as a graduation requirement is not satisfying the goal of a credible evaluation of a student's readiness to graduate, and here's the part I want to confirm, is so that individual communities have their own standards and grades themselves are better predictors. Is that the end of the sentence? Or are you guys going to say, here's an alternative evaluation mechanism before November of 2024
Right.
that's just one of several they can consider?
So grades, and based on the high standards that we have across the state, for the similar standards across the state, I actually think that, yes, and that's what I would say also is there's an exciting work going on, and one of our own members and colleagues at one of my colleagues at UMass Amherst, Jack Schneider, is one of the leading people behind the Massachusetts Consortium for Innovation in Education Assessment, that it was working in a number of school districts as developing performance-based assessments. Rather than filling out a bubble chart, A through B, A through D or something, they actually have performance-based assessments. And there's now years of experience of this. The New York Consortium has done this for years, and they've shown that those kids do actually better than kids who've gone through the standardized testing mode when they go on to college.
So let me just be clear. There will be more suggestions from the proponents, the MTA and others, as to alternative evaluation methods, or yes?
Absolutely.
The answer is yes.
And in
Okay.
fact, the Thrive Act that we are in coalition with, which will be heard on October 10th, includes creating a commission to develop better, more whole child assessments.
Okay. Can we, are you done with this, or are you?
I think so, yeah.
Fair share amendment. I think it's fair to say that you were the primary funders of this effort to impose, I know you don't like the term millionaires tax, but the millionaires tax, the fair share.
multi-millionaires tax,
The
or the
fair
billionaires
share
tax,
amendment, half of the proceeds roughly to transportation, half to education. Can you tell people in its first year, where did the legislature and the governor decide to spend the money, and are you happy?
Yeah, so you see the smile breaking out of my face. We asked the very wealthiest, not the 1%, the half of 1%, to pay a little bit more. And here's some of the things that we just passed in the first year, and only the first $1 billion that the legislature authorized. Universal school meals for every kid forever. Everyone. We don't ask, like, do you deserve it or not? Every kid who comes in gets meals. We're going to have a step towards free community college.
Talk about why that matters so much.
It's one of the beauties, what I love about public schools, what I think we all do, is that everyone's in. You open the door, if you live in the community, you go in, you get the same education. And that means that we try to level the distinctions between kids and how much money they have. So the kid tries to quietly go up and go like, well, I get a discount on this, or I get the free lunch. That starts to make those divisions. And so it's just a beautiful thing to say, you come to school, you need to be well fed, and if you're gonna learn. So now we have that because of the fair share. We have debt-free, we have the beginnings of free community college. We have a new tomorrow's teachers program, because we have a desperate need for more and more diverse teaching workforce. $25,000 scholarships if you go from a Massachusetts high school to a Massachusetts public college, a university, and into a public school. We have a lot more money for greening our school buildings. We've been hearing a lot about heat. MTA, I'm very proud in the Student Opportunity Act, which was a bill several years ago, plus the Fair Share Amendment, there's now $900 million more to spend every year on fixing up or building new school buildings. This is just the beginning, and I'm not even talking about the transportation side, which affects our members and our students and families as well.
I want to be clear, we are not big fans of the legislature, Marjorie and I, and we talked among ourselves, and we also talked to you, I believe, and other proponents about the sort of bait and switch the legislature could do with this, reducing other appropriations and basically using fair share money to fill those holes. You seem to be saying the legislature and the governor clearly honored the spirit as well as the law of the amendment. Is that a fair statement?
I can totally join you in those days of criticizing the legislature, but this budget overall, I have lots of little quibbles, overall was quite good on investing in the areas that they said they would, and that's very exciting.
Now, if you want to know how to make Marjorie Egan happy at like 9 o'clock at night, I'm going to tell you right now. You call her on the phone, as I did last night, and said, have you seen the recent issue of Boston Magazine?
Oh, yeah.
And she said no, and I said, our colleague, our friend, John Keller, has written a piece, the title of which is something like, Are Teachers' Unions Crushing Public School Students, or what's the headline? That's the headline, right? Yeah, right there?
Here it is.
Max knows what it is. He's just not going to tell us.
Are teachers' unions allowing students to fail? That's
and
it's right underneath
the word
crushing.
Crushing is on the. So, do you want to defend yourself in response to John?
It's such a pathetically weak anti-union hit piece that I'm not sure how much response it deserves. Obviously, I'm glad to talk about it, but it is really it tells a bizarre story of the past couple decades that's simply wrong-headed.
Well, there are two things that I thought was interesting in there. He did talk about some of your predecessors, Paul Toner. I think he's running for city council.
He is.
He signs all over the place.
No. He is a city councilor.
He is a city councilor. Okay, because I saw his signs all over the place in Cambridge. He used to be the MTA president. That Mary Tamer, who used to be on the school committee in Boston, she's for this Democrats for Education Reform. Paul Revel, we have him a lot. Used to be the Secretary of Education. They're not for this ballot question that would get rid of this as an education requirement. So it's not like there's a consensus among education experts about this, which I think is worth people's knowing. And he talked about
there's a consensus about the other issue John Keller raised. 2-1, people said no to charter schools, and John's remaking the argument. People spoke.
Well, people spoke. I think there was a lot of misunderstanding about charter schools. I think a lot of people thought that charter schools were going to be in Wellesley and Brookline.
They would be. 12 every year, forever, no limitation.
Yeah,
that's what we fought against. Landslide victory against that.
It was a landslide victory, but here's my question to you, and I do think there's a lot of misunderstanding, because I don't think they would have been in the rich towns, because you don't need them, frankly. But in the poor towns, you probably do need them. There's a long waiting list for charter schools in Boston. But here's the thing I wonder. It is absolutely true that the public schools get screwed if kids leave to go to the charter schools because you're not reimbursed with the amount of money you should be. But you are a monopoly, basically, for free education. If they did reimburse you, what would be your objection? Because you're the only show in town. Charters are very different. I know they're non-union, and I know they have a lot of young teachers who don't last that long. But a lot of people voice, as you can see by the waiting list, they want them. They find them to be better for their kids. Would you be okay with charters if you got reimbursed the way you should?
Public schools are public schools. They're public institutions. They are both publicly funded, but they are also publicly democratically run. This is like a foundation of this state and the nation, that we have our public schools and we have democratically elected school committees to oversee them. charter schools are private. They
a
are
lot
private.
of them are public too.
They are private organizations
They're not
that
all
get
private,
public funding.
Max. They're not all private.
They are. If you look at them, they are. Whatever happens is that the state hires a private contractor. For instance, in Worcester, it's Sturbridge Village. They are a nonprofit contractor.
But they get public funding. This is a distinction without a difference.
Yeah, but here's the thing. If you want, I guess that's the thing. If you are somebody in Boston or wherever you are, Lawrence or Lowell, you're not happy with your schools because they're struggling, and you want to go to a charter school, and you're a poor mother, I don't see why you can't. We've put a limit on it. You're right. It got crushed 2-1. I would argue there was a lot of misunderstanding about what this meant because my neighbors seemed to misunderstand it, and they're a pretty smart group of people. Why not? What's wrong with that? What's wrong with kids having a choice?
Because we have our public school system in which we invest in by community and run them that way. They are run democratically. We invest in them. When we have seen is these charter schools actually, many of them fail. And
then they shut down, right? When they fail, they shut down. The failing public schools don't shut down.
They also send the students that they don't want back to the real public schools. So I think.
But they also take a lot of poor kids of color.
Indeed.
Sometimes predominantly
And Boston voted against that amendment because they knew that they were taking away, fundamentally undermining public education. That was the goal. There was so much money coming from the right wing, and frankly, I mean, the Walton Foundation and others were behind it because they have a national campaign to undermine public education and teachers' unions. So
did you say Boston voted against it too?
Boston voted against question 2.
The charter question.
That's correct.
Do people in Boston not understand it either? That's not a wealthy suburb, Marjorie.
I think there was a lot of false advertising that went on.
No, but you're saying in the wealthy suburbs, they think it's gone there. Boston's not a wealthy suburb, and they voted against it too.
Well, again, how many kids are on the waiting list in Boston? Still today, an awful lot of kids are on the waiting list. And part of it has to do with the long school day, because frankly, if you're a single mother with poor kids, you can't work if your schools are out at 1:30 or 2.
If I could just give the perspective of what the MTA has stood for the past decade or so, is we obviously believe in a great school for every kid, and we've done that by demanding fully funded schools. One of the biggest gains in this past 30 years of ed reform was when we decided we would dramatically invest, not just in all schools, but especially in the poorest schools.
Right.
It's like that you were talking about that you grew up in. That was a huge, huge gap. It's still a gap. But because of the work we did with the Student Opportunity Act and then the Fair Share Amendment, we are steadily adding more funds, more educators, better facilities. That's the most important thing. And if I could just add, on the outside of schools is so important. What happens outside the schools is frankly as important what happens in the classroom.
Right.
And so that's why we fought for paid family medical leave for every person in the state. Actually, educators don't get that paid family medical leave. Sick leave for everyone. The $11 minimum wage, the $15 minimum wage, and now we're pushing for the $20 minimum wage. These are all basic economic justice goals that MTA has fought for, even though these are not directly impacting our own members, but we know that they affect the students and their families.
You said they don't get paid family medical leave. What do teachers get? They get maternity leave and those kinds of things.
We have to negotiate it. Many of remember, it's a 2/3 or greater female workforce, and yet we do not have guaranteed paid family medical leave for our teachers in our schools. They have to negotiate it. We had a big fight. Canton won 3 weeks. Quincy won the ability to use 2 weeks of personal time. So this is a real gap. But the point is, MTA, our members, fought for paid family medical leave for almost every other worker in the state. That is education reform.
One last thing, and we are out of time really, but I've been very interested in this battle over literacy, phonics versus, I guess they call it whole word learning. A lot of people are arguing that we were much better off with phonics 30 or 40 years ago, whatever it is, than we are with the way learning is taught today in reading. What do you think?
Well, so it's not really what I think. We've brought together a bunch of our members who are reading specialists, and they absolutely believe in phonics as well as other techniques. We have to teach students how to put words together, and we also have to teach them how to love to read. And so our educators are actually going to be putting out a report soon based on the work of our own reading specialist members. They are absorbing all the science of reading, but it is not one of these magic bullet moments, like dump everything, and now we're only going to do this phonics. No, phonics has its place, but a whole bunch of other techniques to make students lifelong learners.
So like a combo kind of thing
Absolutely,
you're talking about. Okay.
Max Page, it's good to see you. Thanks
Good to
so
see
much.
you.
Max
Thanks so
Page,
much.
President of the MTA.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Max Page, for coming in. We really appreciate it.
Thanks so
We're going to, by the way,
especially since I'm always giving you a hard time about charter schools.
we're going to discuss all the major ballot questions a lot in the next year, and I'm sure we'll see you plenty. Good to see you, Max.
Great.
Take
Thanks
care.
so much. Bye.
We've been speaking with Max Page, who's the president of the Massachusetts Teachers Association. Coming up, CNN's chief national correspondent, John King, joins us via Zoom for the latest national political headlines. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan. We're live at the Boston Public Library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News, facebook.com/GBH News. We're joined now on Zoom, it appears from a getaway car or something, by CNN's John King, chief national correspondent behind the new reporting project, All Over the Map, with John King. Hey, John, good to see you.
I am all over the map, not terribly far from you guys. Greetings from Nashua, New Hampshire.
Oh, really?
What are you doing? What are you doing there?
He's talking to people.
I know.
Setting up, we had a voter group in Iowa. That was our first piece of the project. And now we're up here in New Hampshire talking to voters largely, again, still looking at the first question, which is the Republican primary. Can Donald Trump be beat? If you're going to beat Donald Trump, deny him the Republican nomination or at least stretch it out. I would argue if you don't do it in Iowa, you have to do it by New Hampshire, right? If he wins the first two or if he's very after that, the snowball's coming down the hill. But there are also a number of other big questions here in New Hampshire. What about Robert Kennedy Jr.? You know, how much will he bruise President Biden? And then will New Hampshire be, as it has been in the last few cycles, a competitive battleground election? Not a lot of electoral votes. It's not a Wisconsin. It's not a Georgia. But guess what? You know, in a very close election, a little state like this could matter. And it's one of those states, you know, Hillary Clinton just won it. Joe Biden won it by more. Who knows what it's going to be like next November? So it's a great laboratory.
So we had some breaking news, as you guys called on CNN this morning, when the Speaker, House Speaker Kevin McCarthy is announcing there's going to be an impeachment. Well, actually, I don't know.
Inquiry.
But yeah, but is it going to happen, or did he just say it should happen? I'm not really sure what the language is.
That's why John's here.
So what happened, John?
It will happen unless he has a revolt now to his left, if you want to call it that. This is him trying to appease the Freedom Caucus, the people, again, I'm not sure left, right apply anymore, but the people to Kevin McCarthy's right flank or conservative flank or mega flank, Trumpy flank, if you will. They have been demanding, some of them want impeachment proceedings. He has agreed now to have an impeachment inquiry, telling that the chairman of the key committees, Oversight, Judiciary, and others, will now have an inquiry to try to make the public case about whether they should go forward with an actual impeachment proceeding. This is a big concession by the Speaker, and it's connected to everything else happening in Washington right now. We're about to go, we have a couple weeks deadline. Are we going to shut down the government? Are we going to continue to fund Ukraine? A whole number of funding and spending priority issues where, you know, it's been a couple months, I guess, since we last talked about this, but Kevin McCarthy's speakership is always on a high wire. And here we go again. And so he's giving the Matt Gaetzes, the Freedom Caucus, the Marjorie Taylor Greens, the Jim Jordans, the Jim Comers, he's giving them something they want. Some of them want more. They want actual impeachment proceedings. But he's giving them an inquiry, and he's hoping then that he can get them into a room and say, now you have to help me pass these spending bills. Is that going to happen? Can he manage them? Guess what? The next couple of weeks is going to be really interesting.
You know, so last night or this morning, I saw a Republican congressperson, Nancy Mace, on your air trying to thread the needle around this impeachment inquiry thing. And it was last night. It was Caitlin Collins asking questions about, what's this based upon, essentially? What evidence do you have that the president benefited from any of Hunter Biden's business deals? The answer, which I found so embarrassingly pathetic, I've seen things that you haven't seen that I can't share with you. Is there any objective evidence that any Republican has produced publicly so far to show that Joe Biden has in any way financially benefited from anything that his son did?
No. No, and it's a key point that they have not presented any factual documentary evidence that Joe Biden personally benefited financially in any way from Hunter Biden's business dealings. I've said this before on your air, Hunter Biden is a swamp creature. There are thousands, unfortunately, hundreds of swamp creatures, sons of politicians, former politicians, daughters of politicians who do this for a living. I'm not excusing it. And Joe Biden has a blind spot. He probably should have dealt with this years ago when he was in the Senate, or vice president, and now he's the president. And guess what? Hunter Biden's likely to be on trial for gun charges during the presidential campaign. But to your point about they have not publicly been able to connect those dots, Jim. And so that would be the credibility challenge going forward. Yes, Hunter Biden, you can say what you want. You don't have to like Hunter Biden. But they keep using the term, Biden crime family, or Speaker McCarthy today used the term culture of corruption. That makes the right wing, that makes the base happy when he says things like that. My question is, so that may get him through the crisis of the moment, if you will, in managing his sheep in the House Republican Conference. What do the American people think about it? What do people in a suburban place like Nashua think about that when they get around to voting, whether it's in the primary or next year? And around America, what do they think? So this is the tight spot he is in with a very narrow House majority, trying to get through the day and then the week and then the month. What does it do to your image and your standing when you actually get to the election year? We don't know. So
to follow up on that, so does that mean, okay, I've got to have an impeachment inquiry to keep my job now? Does that mean he's got to shut down government to plead? I mean, there are, and you hinted at this a minute ago, and so did this Congresswoman Mace, talk about there are a bunch of Republicans who won in districts that Joe Biden won as president, obviously much more moderate districts. And while this pleases lunatics like Gates and Marjorie Taylor Greene, all this extreme stuff, it obviously puts moderate Republicans who also help him get a bare majority at some risk. I mean, how does he juggle all this? I mean, what does he do, for example, on the debt ceiling? Does he shut the government down and potentially put those people at risk? Or does he not shut it down and put himself at risk?
Or does he have the power to make that call, if you will?
Well, that's a good point.
Is it up to him in the end? He is trying. He's trying to give them a little candy here, Jim. I'll give you your impeachment inquiry. I'll give you not everything you want, but something you wanted here. And I'm counting on enough of you when I say, now I need your help, a week from now or 2 weeks from now. The question is, does that happen? Because so many of them have said no. So many of them have said, we want even deeper cuts than we were promised at the beginning of this process, and we will shut down the government to do that. You make a key point. Every time he appeases the Matt Gaetz, the Marjorie Taylor Greenes of the world, he puts on their own tightrope the Don Bacons of the world, the guys who run in very competitive districts. And they're, depending on how you want to look at it, there are anywhere from 12 to maybe 18 or 20 of those vulnerable House Republicans in more moderate or competitive battleground districts. And he's putting them, anything he does that to appease, to your words, the crazies, the people to his right, puts them at risk. And so he has, to his credit, I'm not taking sides, but remember at the very beginning, everyone said, is Kevin McCarthy going to last a week? Is he going to last a month? He has been able to manage this, but he's mostly managed it, though, by pushing the big questions down the road. Now here they all come at once. Spending, impeachment, into the election. How do you deal with Donald Trump? They're all right there now. And so it's whack-a-mole season for Kevin McCarthy. And can he handle it? That's a fascinating question.
Imagine this was your job. Every day you had to go in and deal with these kind of, I said, nutty people on one side and moderate people in the middle. I mean, talk about whack-a-mole. I can't imagine, how is this fun for him, or how is this worth it? I guess you're a very powerful guy, but boy, you know what I'm saying?
He says he loves the job. I get it, Marjorie. I get it. But he says he loves the job. So we're going to see how much he loves it in the next couple weeks.
So in a similar vein, but not one about corruption, how much does he love the job? Nancy Pelosi is a mere 83. She has to travel 6 hours in each direction to do her job and then to go visit her constituents. And she announces 2 days ago she's running for re-election. And again, she has no power. I mean, she has the power of persuasion because she's such a huge historical figure, but she has no titular power, for lack of a better expression. What's behind that, do you think, John King?
Jim, if I could answer that question in a, I think I'd rather put the energy toward winning the Powerball. I mean, I get it in the sense that, look, we make fun of politicians all the time. I don't understand somebody, of her, her husband just went through this very serious challenge at the house. She's got a big family, remarkable children and grandchildren. I don't get it. I don't get it. But she loves the House. She loves the power. I think, like President Biden, she somehow has it up here that she needs to stay around to make sure that Donald Trump is escorted off the stage finally. There are some Democrats who think that they are central to that, and that that it won't be as successful. It might not be successful at all if they are not a piece of that. So I think there are a number of layers to it. She does like the House. San Francisco has been in the news a lot lately, and not a lot of that news has not been good. And I think she wants to help the city get back on its footing, which she does still have considerable influence as a senior member in Washington. She's not the speaker anymore. But that was a surprise to me. I'll give you that you just thought that, okay, you were the speaker, then you had this term, now you're going to ride out to the sunset. Maybe ask Joe Biden for an ambassadorship somewhere for a couple of years before it goes. But nope, she wants to stay in the House.
Well, speaking of people that are in their 80s, Jim saw the president at he was speaking with the
press conference of Vietnam. Vietnam.
Okay,
well, for those who haven't seen it, and I have to say, I am not one of these people who, I think Joe Biden has done a terrific job in a lot of ways. I think he is too old for the job. And just the other day, CNN is one of the few non-lunatic outlets that actually reported this. He's in the middle of a press conference answering a question in Vietnam, and he's rambling. And I've never seen this before, ever. In the middle of his answer, his press secretary stands up and says, "Press conference is over, thank you very much," while the President of the United States is speaking. I thought it was humiliating, and I think to the good fortune of the President, it hasn't been publicized much. I'm sure it'll come up if there's a primary. I have to say, I just don't see how Joe Biden, in this kind of public condition, survives 12 months leading. I don't mean survives as opposed to dies, but I mean survives politically when the focus is going to be even more extreme, and he's going to have to be more public as a candidate. What was your reaction to the other day, and what's your latest thinking about the age thing that is relentless?
Well, a lot of Democrats privately, Jim, very few publicly, but a lot of them privately raised the very question you just raised, that it's embarrassing, humiliating is the term you used, disrespectful, unprecedented to see the White House press secretary cut off a press conference while the President of the United States' lips are still moving. And he's still on the stage. The president usually ends his own press conference, or the press secretary might at the end of a question or answer say, last question, but not in the middle like that. Look, everybody can watch that and look for themselves. That was an embarrassing moment for the President of the United States, whether he is 45 or whether he's in his 80s. And so can you say, well, he's on a long trip, he's in Asia? Sure, those things happen. I've taken those trips. I've taken those trips in my 30s and in my 40s, and you're exhausted on the end of, and sometimes you're on live television, and you're exhausted on the end of those trips. But everybody should just watch that themselves and make their own judgments. And to the point, we just had this in our CNN polling last week. A lot of Democrats are worried that he has the stamina and the intellectual capacity to continue in the job. And so he is a weak incumbent. That's just a fact. That's not a partisan statement. If you look at the numbers, because of inflation, because of real significant concerns, even among his own base about his age, and it's not the number, it's his performance. People see him. He doesn't do a ton of events, but so when you don't have a lot of events, you don't have 20 events where he's wow spectacular, and then you have a horrible one, right? You say, okay, the guy had a bad day, right? But you don't, because you see him so little, when he does something like this, I do think it's going to give people pause. That's one of the reasons I'm going to be on the road throughout the campaign year, to see if that makes a difference. Right now, again, he thinks that he is the person that he kicked Donald Trump out once and now he wants to put him into retirement. Can he do that? Is he up to the rigors of the campaign? Again, it's not a partisan statement. I think that is a giant question.
Well, you mentioned privately a lot of Democrats say these same things, although they don't say it publicly. But you do, the Democrats had it last time around, and I'm not comparing Donald Trump to Hillary Clinton in terms of their capabilities, but she was a very unpopular person. The only person more unpopular than her was Donald Trump. And now again, you have this drumbeat of Democrats saying, we don't want him, we don't want him, we don't want him. And it's like the party kind of ignores it and just sort of goes along. And I don't know. I mean, is that wise? I mean, I'm not sure what the mechanisms are to pull somebody out in the last minute. And Kamala Harris is not a particularly popular vice president either. So, but again, it seems like almost like people keep telling them and telling them, and they just plow ahead.
I think this question will continue to be raised if the president can put together 3 or 4 months where he's out campaigning vigorously and you don't have an event like Vietnam happen again, the temperature, the volume dial will go back a little bit. But if you don't see that, this question is going to be asked right up until the Democratic convention, where, again, you have primaries and people vote, and that's the process and the rules. But at a convention, you can also vote to suspend the rules. I'm not saying that's going to happen. I just think that we all, after living the last 25 years of American political life, should realize rule nothing out and keep an open mind that, unpredictable things might happen. Is that going to happen? The White House says no. The White House says the media is making too big of a deal about this. Again, I would urge everybody, watch it yourself. Come to your own conclusions about what you see. Don't listen to anybody in the media. Use your own eyes and your own common sense, and then put it into context of watch him for the next 3, 4, 5, 6 months and see if, okay, bad day, or okay, big problem.
Hey, John, before you go, while all of the non-Trumpian defendants, well, they're all Trumpian, but the non-Trump defendants have put up a brave face, maybe not as brave as Trump has put up publicly. What's the inside scoop in your world about how much worry there is from people who don't have the stature or the wealth, even though Letitia James, the New York State Attorney General, says he doesn't have nearly the wealth that he says he does? What's the sense of concern, fear, whatever, in the hearts of the Giulianis and the Meadowses and all these other people who have bet on Donald Trump and now appear to be on the losing side?
Look, even if you're 100% innocent, if you're a defendant in a very serious criminal racketeering trial, you are nervous. You are nervous. This is going to cost you tens of thousands, if not millions of dollars in legal fees. Fani Willis, again, they're all innocent. They all have a chance to prove their case in court. But if you read through the charging documents, it's the allegations are well documented and well crafted. That does not mean there's not a defense. That does not mean there are things we don't know where they can come in and argue against it. But you're talking, again, how many times have we talked about how many people who've gotten close to Donald Trump have had their reputations ruined, their finances ruined, their lives essentially, ruined in some way. So there's a broad wake here. Now, I still have a question of when these things go to trial. Some of them are fighting to move into federal court. Some of the defendants are fighting, I don't want to be at the same trial with Donald Trump or with Rudy Giuliani, so separate me out. There's weeks, if not months, of the legal stuff going on. But of course, think about some of these people were accomplished attorneys. Rudy Giuliani was an iconic American figure. And the taint of Trump has just, put them in this horrible box.
Okay, before you go, 2 quick questions. I suggested to Trenny Casey from NBC Sports Boston 2 hours ago that Tom Brady will be the next quarterback of the New York Jets. Do you agree with that? Look at John King's face. I think he's going to have a stroke. What do you think, John King?
No. Tom Brady will go to Tampa, but he's not going to the Meadowlands. Before you guys let me go, I have to tell you one quick
thing. I have one more, too, but go ahead.
Go ahead. You go first.
Okay, my other one is this. The thing we're going to do with our listeners when we say goodbye to you is we're going to talk about the most annoying phrases, things like deep dive and that sort of thing in the English language to people. Is there one at the top of John King's list that he just cannot stand hearing people say?
No.
Okay, good.
See that? He's a nice guy.
Because he's too nice.
No.
I know.
We're very critical and crabby.
I'll try to think of one, but I try to listen. And the one thing you learn, especially when you travel, is everybody's a little different.
Well, you're incredible.
To give you a pause.
You can't be this nice, is all I can say.
Well, my kids have some things they say to me, but I can't repeat them on the radio.
Okay, so what do you got there?
So I woke up in Portsmouth, New Hampshire this morning, and I took a nice walk across the bridge into Kittery, Maine. And I was coming back across the bridge, and this wonderful woman named Dolores came up to me, and she said, "You look like John King." And I said, "I am John King." And she said, "I love listening to you on Jim and Marjorie."
Oh, there you go.
And I said, "They're my therapy," and she said, "They're mine too."
Oh, that is a beautiful story.
Okay, you are a very nice guy,
You guys
John
are great.
King.
No, it's you guys have amazing reach. And with that reach, I know you know this comes responsibility. And but it's pretty amazing. It's pretty cool when I travel and people say, "I love you" on Jim and Marjorie. It had nothing to do with you. I do have a day job. I don't know if anyone knows that. I do have another job.
We didn't know that. Hey, John King, we love you. It's great to talk to you. Talk to you next week. Good luck in New Hampshire.
John, thank you very much. Great to talk to you. We've been speaking with CNN's John King. He's Chief National Correspondent, and he's behind the new reporting project All Over the Map, which is really informative because he talks to people about why they hold some very odd opinions that may be very different from yours, and he makes sense of it all. Okay, as Jim just said, after a quick break, we're opening up the phone and text lines. What phrases would you love to banish forever? How about circle back? How about win-win? How about anything Jim ever says? I didn't write that, our staff did. How about tools in the toolbox?
No, that drives me out of my mind.
That drives me crazy. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News and facebook.com/GBH News.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy, Marjorie Egan, live at the library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News, facebook.com/GBH News. We do this about once a year. We love it. It's time to, I don't know, circle back to or drill down into a topic we've discussed on the show before. Annoying corporate lingo or phrases like drill down and circle back in general that just drive you nuts. There's some old ones that have been around forever, and there's some new ones that are just recently developed. There's this piece in the Wall Street Journal. It's all about the canceling of the term, listen to this, it gives me hives, the term feedback in favor of a new, more gentle one, feed forward. I mean, really? Really?
Yeah, feed forward sounds like you're spinning up or something.
Exactly, nicely put. Let's do a deep dive, shall we? What phrases do you wish you could never hear again? Let me start with a few. I said before, I can't stand deep dive. I can't stand double down. I can't stand tools in the toolbox.
Tools in the toolbox.
I cannot stand I'm giving 110% of myself. They drive me absolutely berserk. How about you?
Well, someone has just texted something that you say quite a bit, Jim.
What is it?
Well, there are two things, actually.
What are they?
The first is otherworldly.
I know, I say it too much.
And
Drives
the second
me
one
nuts.
is, do you know who I am?
Oh, that's funny, Marjorie. I do not say, do you know who I am? The number's 877-301-8970. I mean, you are somebody who cares deeply about the language. So what is it that really puts you over the edge?
I don't like drill down. I don't let's. This is stuff a lot of us in the media say. Let's unpack this.
I can't stand that.
Let's do it. Let's drill down.
There's a lot to unpack here. That's the expression they use.
We're going to do a deep dive into this. But the one that really gets me going, indeed, is tools in the toolbox. That really drives me crazy.
Oh, I didn't know you hated that too.
Yeah, I do. That drives me crazy. Well, a lot of people I like say it. We've heard.
Carl Rose said it before, and Marjorie attacked her.
I did.
You did. I think you did.
And you know, I say this a lot,
What?
which I shouldn't. You know. You know, I do say that.
Yeah,
a
well,
lot.
that's like, it's just sloppy, whatever.
Well, so you're trying to formulate your great thoughts.
Yeah.
But anyway, what do you guys think is, or guys and gals, I should say, what really drives you crazy? Boots on the ground is one that apparently drives a lot of people crazy. Low-hanging
That
fruit.
drives me out of my mind. Even though, by the way, it is a perfect descriptor of what it is. Low-hanging fruit, that is.
And the reason the feed forward thing has been mentioned is because apparently people get freaked out when they're going to get feedback from the boss. Would you feel better if the boss...
It's feed forward?
No feedback today? We're going to feed forward. Oh, okay, then I guess that's fine. Robert from Lowell, you are first on the what words you don't like, or phrases you don't like, I should say. Thank you
Robert.
for calling.
What's up?
Hey, good afternoon. And
You too.
I'm afraid I'm going to have to rib Jim a little bit.
Go ahead.
I would argue. I would argue.
Do I say that all the time?
That's a good one.
Oh my God! And it's like, we know, Jim. We know you would argue.
That's a good one.
That's pretty good. So, Robert, if I didn't say it, would you have as much of a problem with it? Is it me or is it the expression, or both?
Well, you're the only person I know that would say it. That says it. I've never heard it anywhere else, but I hear it 4 or 5 days a week when I come in.
Oh, my God.
So.
Well, I would argue that you'd hear it elsewhere. Thank you, Robert. I appreciate
We have a lot
your call.
of ones. Impactful. That drives Lynn
No,
crazy
you
from
know how I
Southborough.
feel. I don't like impact even as a verb,
Yep.
by the way.
Thinking outside the box, Roger from Littleton.
That's bad.
That's billion with a B. That's Betsy from Somerville.
That's a good one.
Mary Ellen from Haverhill, rather. We have to pivot and low-hanging fruit.
Wasn't pivot like the word of the year a couple years ago? I mean,
no.
the most used, and I can't stand it.
Can you pivot?
Let's go to Davita in Harvard. Hey, Davita, how are you?
I'm doing great. All I got to say is, don't ever reach out to me.
Oh, yeah. We hear that a lot in the news business, too. I'm going to reach out to someone. Why don't they just say I'm going to call them?
Yeah.
You know, why are we reaching
What
out?
does that do to you physically? I mean, when I hear certain of these terms, I have a physical, not just a mental reaction. When you hear the reach out thing, what does that do to you?
Oh, my God. My blood pressure goes up, my heart beats, and I just want to take the person that says it and shake them.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Davita, thank you for your contribution to the show. We appreciate it.
You know, here's a good one. You hear this a lot.
Yeah.
Went missing. Is that grammatically correct? If someone is missing, they went missing? They are missing? It would seem to be what they are. They are missing. Or they were missing and now they're found.
What's that
I don't
New
know.
England expression? Not for nothing. Not for nothing drives me out
not
of
for
my
nothing.
mind.
That's
But
a
there's
big
another one, too.
That's a big one around here.
In any case, 877-301-8970.
Here's another one about
What is
you,
it?
Jim.
What is it?
Let me be clear. That's what Jim says when he says the obvious. Here's another one that disturbs somebody. We're pregnant. Couples say that sometimes. We're pregnant.
Oh, we're pregnant?
Actually,
we're not.
There's only one person usually
Yeah.
that's pregnant at a time.
You know what? I don't know if this is the point that Zoe is making here. Is she puts up on our little message board here, couldn't care less. People get it backwards
all the time.
the
Yeah,
time.
I do too.
Yeah,
I
oh, you do?
Yeah, I think I get that.
But that's
wrong.
not an expression you hate. It's just an expression that is occasionally misused.
Yeah, it should be I could not care less. Right?
Right. If you want to trivialize something,
Yeah.
you could not care less. Bill in Gloucester, I'm sorry. Bill, hold 1 second.
No, I was just going to say, to be honest with you.
That's horrible.
That implies that mostly you're not honest, but in this particular case, or frankly, as opposed to saying you wouldn't normally, you know what I mean? People say that a lot. Or to be frank.
Let me be honest. That's a real tough one, but that is a
tough
real
one.
tough one. Bill in Gloucester, welcome to the show. How are you, Bill? What do you got?
Pretty good. I think a lot of these phrases we're talking about are very important, writ large.
Oh, writ large.
When I hear writ large, it drives me nuts, and I don't know why. Writ large.
That's a good one.
Obviously, but
I can hear it in your voice, Bill. That's a good one.
That's a good one.
Can I
How
tell you-
about at the end of
Thank
the
you, Bill.
day? At the end
That's
of the
pretty
day.
bad.
That's from Sean in Arlington. Thank you, Sean.
You know what's another one? And incidentally, I was talking, I think it was to Jamie the other day, maybe it was you, complaining about how this phrase is used, and then I proceeded to use it in exactly the way I was complaining about when someone asks you a question. Let me ask you a question, Marjorie.
Yes.
I'm going to go get a cup of coffee. Would you like me to get a cup of coffee? What is the appropriate answer?
Say that again, please.
Well, in a minute, I'm going to get a cup of coffee. Would you like a cup of coffee?
Sure.
Right, that's okay. You know what's not okay?
What?
I'm good. I didn't ask you if you were good. I didn't ask you if you're good or not good. I said, do you want a cup of coffee?
No worries.
No worries, that's right. No worries. I don't know if I can finish this segment, by the way.
I hope my cousin's not listening. He says it all the time. It's all good.
Oh,
it's all good. It's really terrible. It's really horrible, but it's all good. Don't worry about it.
But really, let me just say,
ones.
for people listening who I have any kind of personal relationship with, if I am interested in whether you're good or not, I will say to you, are you good or not? I will not say, do you want a cup of coffee? Do you want to go down the street? Do you want to go to a movie? No, I'm good. What does that mean?
That means they're good and they're fine without the cup of coffee.
Okay, that's not acceptable to me.
How about this one? Three-legged stool. Back in the day.
Back in the day is a bad one.
A lot of people are really complaining about journalists saying all the time, and we do. There's a lot to unpack here.
Yeah, it's bad.
Yeah. Oh, how about this one? My bad.
That could make top 10, by the way. That is really horrible. Let's go to Alexander in Duxbury. How are you, Alexander? What do you got?
Okay, here it is. No problem.
Well, that's up there with I'm good.
No problem.
How horrible is that?
I never suggested there was a problem.
Exactly. That is exactly my point. If someone says, is there a problem, it is fine to say, no problem. Other than that, Alexander, you nailed it. Thank you very much for the call. We appreciate it.
A lot of people don't like no worries.
Yeah.
Carrie in Southborough says, when someone says no, especially the younger crowd says no worries after I ask a question, I always think, I wasn't worried. I just had a request.
Yeah.
That's a good
877-301-8970. On this list, I don't know where this list came from. One of the horrible ones we haven't mentioned, the new normal is one that is
the
really...
new normal.
New normal was not... I actually liked the new normal until it was said every other word. You know what I mean?
I say that a lot.
Actually, do you know what I just realized I said that I can't stand? Do you know what I mean? I mean,
I say that all the time.
I know. I mean, the answer is, I assume if you don't know what I mean, you'll say to me, I don't know what you mean, right?
Someone wrote me a long text yesterday complaining about my constantly saying, do you know what I mean?
Who was that?
Do you know what I mean? I don't know, but they were very upset that I say, apparently, do you know what I mean 17 times in one day.
She's good.
She's good. That's right. Oh, out of an abundance of caution.
That's a bad one, too.
That's a big one.
Yeah.
Yep. A lot of people are upset about, let's unpack this, Jim. I just want to let you know.
Listen to this. As we know, Zoe Matthews, who is one of our crack producers here, her probably most impressive employment was when she worked at Market Basket. And she says, when I worked at Market Basket, we got guidance from up on high from one of the Demoulas brothers. Is that true? Wow. That cashiers should not say no worries after interactions. We had to say thank you because all the old people hated it.
Well,
that's pretty good.
Yeah,
that's pretty good.
It tends to be a younger person that says it. Oh, here's one, very unique. That's a grammatical error.
I can't even.
You're either unique
or you're
not unique. You're either one of a kind or you're two, three, or more of a kind.
Can I tell you something? A lot of journalists on the radio in the morning, well, it's not just the morning, but that's why I'm listening on the way in. A lot of journalists use an adjective before unique, which drives me out of my mind.
Well, let's face it, Jim. My obsession with grammar is useless because grammar's gone right out the window. Nobody cares anymore, and nobody speaks English.
That is grammar. That is.
Yeah,
what is grammar again?
Yeah.
What is grammar?
If you're unique,
what's the matter with you, Jamie? I mean, what is grammar?
Of a kind. You can't be.
I know it's a word thing.
One of a kind.
I understand
right?
that. Okay, fine.
Okay, Brendan in Worcester. Thank you for calling.
What do you have there, Brendan?
Hey, Jim and Marjorie, happy Election Day to you both.
That's right.
You too. Yeah.
Votes.
What's up?
GOTV, that's a good one. I actually like that one.
I like it too.
Doing this, I thought I would maybe have the worst one you had all day, but feet forward. Oh my God, I think I threw up a little bit.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like.
It's pretty bad. It does sound like that. Yeah. So this one's like tool in the toolkit, but someone decided to make it worse.
What's that?
Having an arrow in the quiver.
Yeah, that is exactly what that is, and that is really, really horrible. That is a bad one.
That's a good one.
When I hear it, it's like, are we running a business, or are we trying to stop the orcs from conquering the Little Orcs?
That's a good line, Brendan. Thank you for your call. We appreciate it.
This is Nathan in Brookline. 2 terms I hate: loop in on an email thread,
That's
adding
bad.
another participant, and sunsetting something when ending a website or ending something
Well,
else.
I actually like sunsetting. I don't know what
You
the problem
sunsetting?
is.
Well, keep
Can we
on
get back
using
to
it, Jim.
the I'm good thing for a second? Does that bother you as much as it bothers me? I mean,
I don't know why it bothers me.
But does
I
it?
think I'm good and no worries are kind of on the
They
equal-
are the exact
yeah,
same thing.
equal.
They're
kind of-
variations of the same thing.
Maybe it's a coping mechanism for people trying to control their anxiousness.
No,
or
why can't they
something.
just answer the question? I mean, why don't you answer the question?
Do you want coffee? No.
Sure. You said sure, I would. I'd like a cup of coffee. Yeah.
I don't know.
Okay, good. That's a good
I
answer.
don't have an answer, Jim.
What?
I'm sorry. I don't have an
Can
answer.
you come up
I'm
with
sorry.
one? Why don't you do a deep dive, figure it out if you can figure it out. Let's go to Mark in Natick.
Oh.
What?
It is
Mark,
what,
hold on.
It is what it is.
That is another
What
top
is
10.
it? That's the question. When people
Yeah.
say it is what it is.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
What is it?
It is what it is.
Well,
is what it is.
I know, but it's not a very satisfying
No, it's not.
explanation.
Can we go?
Oh, Jim says anecdotally all the time.
I do say that.
I do too.
I'm sorry.
I do too. That's because you're trying to avoid those anecdotal stories.
What's the thing that people were criticizing you for yesterday? Do you know what I mean?
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's
do you know what I
bad.
mean?
It's
I do
really
say that a lot. Yeah, at the
Yeah.
end of a question, I'll ask somebody, Max Page, what about charter schools? You know what I mean? You know what I mean? You know what I mean?
This is a good one. Who wrote this one at the top of the, is this Zoe? This is a good one. This is not quite in the realm of what we're talking about, but it is wildly or as she says, very triggering. Personally, I find it extremely grating when, let's say, someone's offering a suggestion in a meeting and another person immediately goes, okay, next.
That's right.
That is about
What
as
a-
demeaning
yeah.
as it. That ever happened to you? Never. Okay, fine. Never.
You and your stupid suggestion should just go back to the corner
No, that
of the
is a
room.
really good one, even though I'm not, whatever.
Here's another one.
Whatever is another one. Why did I say whatever? What does whatever mean?
I'm getting criticized
What?
for saying Tesla la la.
I know, that's driving me nuts, by the way. That doesn't fit here either, but it's, why do you do that every single time I
Because
mention
I
my car?
love to give you a hard time.
Do you
Jim.
see the new Teslas, the Model 3, which is what I have, the cheap version?
Oh,
They
they
look
do-
like Maseratis.
They do?
I mean, they are incredible.
I
and
read-
they're a lot cheaper than what I spent on this thing six
Well, I
months
read
ago.
where he's looking to make a $25,000 Tesla la la la.
Yeah, but there's a lot. That's probably rear-wheel drive, which you can't even buy in. I mean, you can buy it. You're crazy if you buy it in any place that has snow. Why am I talking about that? I have no idea.
Here's a person that says mine is actually a malapropism, flush out, instead of flesh out, right? Shouldn't it
Well,
be?
no, I'm not. Well, what does that person mean? Write again and explain what usage you're talking about. Pat and West. What?
Sorry, I keep interrupting.
Okay, now Marjorie's having the most fun she's ever had.
I
Go
am.
ahead.
Shelter in place. Why not just say stay home? Stay home.
Do you know that when, I don't mean to, obviously I'm not making light of this, but the first time I ever heard the term shelter in place was when Deval Patrick
Yep.
used it when the marathon, when the younger Sarnia was still loose and ultimately in Watertown. I hadn't even heard the expression before. Pat and Westford, you're next on Boston Public Radio. Thank you for calling. Hi.
Hi. Standing on line drives me crazy.
You mean
I
as
always
opposed
look
to in line?
in line?
I
yes.
am totally with you. What is that about?
I'm not sure, but I don't think I've heard in line in years, and I realize how bad my vocabulary has slipped. When I listened to a British show the other night, I went, holy smoke.
Well,
I think it is a British term.
what, standing online?
I think so. I could
Standing
be
in
wrong.
line.
Yeah, someone could correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's where I heard it in a
Pat, thank
British
you.
TV show.
Thank you.
For years
Boy,
she's been upset
a
about
lot of
this.
people really hate what I say, Jim.
What
here.
is it?
It's not just, do you know what I mean? You know what I say all the time that apparently drives people crazy? You guys, you guys, you guys.
You know, I'm sorry. I'm going to defend that.
I'm supposed to say you guys and gals, I guess, or ladies and
I don't-
gentlemen,
I-
or am I not supposed to say ladies?
I don't know.
Men and women?
I don't know. Well, it's not just men and women. I mean, but you guys, to me, is a generic term. I'm pretty sensitive to offense, and I don't get there. Go ahead.
We've got some more. Ramping up.
Ramping up is good.
Yeah.
Not great. Good.
Yeah, the optics.
Yeah, the optics is something. I mean,
I kind of like that.
That describes, though, what it is. So while we're waiting for Zoe to tell us any more personal offenses she's experienced, let's go to the calls. Mark and Natick, you're next on Boston Public Radio. How are you, Mark?
Hey, I'm doing great. Thank you. What a fun topic.
Thank you.
I'm just trying to land the plane.
Oh,
that's a good one,
a good
too.
one. That's a good one.
If you're not a pilot, that's nothing you should say.
That is and even if you're a pilot, unless you're actually trying to land the plane, you shouldn't say it, right, Mark?
That's what makes people a little nervous.
Thank you. That was a good one. Thank you for adding that to the conversation. I appreciate it. 877-301-8970. Carolyn in Weymouth. Hey, Carolyn, what do you got?
Anything with Tom Brady in the set.
That's a good one.
You've had
That's a
it,
good one.
Carolyn. That's it. You're done. All over.
I have never been a fan, and the saturation of his name, his face, his smirk, the quantity of hair he now has, and just everything about him sends me over the top.
You know, that's a very interesting point about the hair. Most men start to lose their hair. Their hair gets thinner and thinner.
He gained it. That's
Miraculously, he gets more and
true.
more hair, Caroline. It's unbelievable. Every year he seems to have thicker hair. What's going on there, do you think?
He's like a chia pet.
Boy, you spit every word out in that call, Carolyn. That was beautiful. Thank you.
He's not one of your favorites. Okay, everybody's criticizing stuff I say and something you say.
Well, let's hear it. What is it?
Full disclosure.
Yeah, I do full disclosure. Yeah. That is really, it's almost like to be honest kind of thing.
Yeah.
Know?
How about I'm there for you? I think people
What's
say
wrong with
that. Well, I think they say that.
Even if they're not?
In kindness, but when they're not really there.
Well, that's not an expression problem. That's just you're not telling the truth. You're not really there for them, right?
I think that's what the meaning is, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Vis-a-vis.
Vis-a-vis is pretty bad. What would you rate? We only have a minute left. What would
back in the day.
If you had to rate the worst of all of them,
the one that drives me the most crazy,
yeah.
I have to say, because everybody says it now.
What?
I hope I haven't said it. I probably have.
What?
Tools in the toolbox.
No.
I'm going to use every
Wait,
tool.
tools in the toolbox?
Toolbox.
What is a toolbox? Marriage is what brings us together. That's Princess Bride. For those who haven't seen the film lately.
That is the Princess Bride.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we are done. There are so many good ones here.
I have to say,
Jennifer Millis is sick of hearing CNN say breaking news, breaking news, breaking news.
That's bad.
It's breaking news. You get it on your phone now. It's breaking news, and somebody went around the corner and ran over a mouse or something, and they're saying it's breaking news.
So Ross from Texas, who called in but he couldn't stay on hold, hates when people say that's a good question. Well, you know, by the way,
No, we interviewers love that.
No, but they don't mean it. They don't mean it's a good question. That's a good question is a delaying tactic so that the person who says it has more time to think of the answer. They don't think it's a good question.
Jim, every time somebody says, Jim, that's an excellent question.
I do go like this in the studio. I do 2 fists up. It's true. Well, you know why? Because when it happens, I'm good. So that is all. That is all.
No worries.
By the way, I literally feel like physically ill from this conversation. That's another one. Literally. Why do you have to say literally? You're either physically ill or you're not physically ill.
Because it's a low-hanging fruit,
Okay,
Jim.
thank you.
And there's no worries about getting rid of it.
Let's get out of here. Goodbye.
Okay, thank you for listening to another edition of Boston Public Radio. You can keep up with us 24/7 by way of our podcast. We have a 3-hour one. We also have a great new one by our producer, Zoe Matthews. It's a half hour, and it's a shorter, obviously. Okay, tune in tomorrow for NYU medical ethicist Art Kaplan, Harvard's national security expert Juliette Kayyem, food and policy analyst Corby Kummer, animal authority Cy Montgomery, plus Steve Johnson, whose decades-long quest to solve his brother's murder just got turned into a docuseries on Hulu.
Can I just say the story? This guy's from Cambridge, Steve Johnson. His brother Scott died in 1988 in Australia, theoretically committing suicide by jumping off a cliff. 30 years of relentlessness, and his brother not only proved that it was a murder, but helped identify the murderer. It's one of the most inspiring stories ever. Steve will join us tomorrow.
I want to thank our crew, Zoe Matthews, Aidan Conley, Nicole Garcia, Hannah Loss. Our engineer is John the Claw Parker. Our executive producer is Jane Bologna. I want to thank you all that came down to the Boston Public Library.
Thank you all for coming.
I really
We appreciate
that too. And we want to thank the BPL team, Angelica Marrero, Colin Cockrell, Sandra Lopez-Burke, and Evelyn Brito. I am Marjorie Egan.
I am Jim Browdy.
Thanks so much for tuning in today. I hope you can tune in tomorrow. And Jim and I are going to really work on stop saying things that annoy everybody so much.
One of us is.
One of us is.
Bye.
Okay. Bye.